Martyrs of Manda _ General Parvateshwar and his 25 brigadiers sat to the right of Emperor Daksha. To Daksha's left sat the Nilkanth, the administrative Brahmins led by Prime Minister Kanakala and the governors of the 15 provinces. The decision of the council is a given, said Daksha, beginning the PRCN eatings _ the question is when do we attack? It will take us at the most a month to be ready to march, Your Highness, said Parvateshwar _ you know that there are no roads between Meluha and our army would have to travel through dense, impenetrable forests. So even if we begin the march in a month, we will not be in Swadweep before 3 months from today. So time is of the essence. Then let the preparations begin. Your Highness, said Kanakala, adding a Brahmin voice of reason to the battle cry of the Kshatriyas. May I suggest an alternative? An alternative? Asked a surprised Daksha. Please don't misunderstand me, said Kanakala _ I understand the rage of the entire nation about what happened at Manda _ but we want vengeance against the perpetrators of the crime, not all of Swadweep _ could we try and see whether a scalpel might work before ye bring out the mighty war sword? The path you suggest is one of cowardice, Kanakala said. Parvateshwar, no Parvateshwar, my aim is to seek our vengeance at minimum cost to Meluhan lives, said Kanakala politely. After all, discretion is the better part of valor. My soldiers are resolute and will defend Meluha to the death, Madam Prime Minister. I know they will, said Kanakala, maintaining her composure. And I know that you too are willing to shed your blood for Meluha _ my suggestion is that we send an emissary to Emperor Dilipar and request him to surrender the terrorists who perpetrated this attack. We can threaten that if he doesn't cooperate, we will attack with all the might at our disposal. His eyes scowling with impatience, Parvateshwar said, request him. And why would he listen? For decades, the Swadweepans have got away with their nefarious activities because they think we don't have the stomach for a fight, and if we talk about this scalpel approach after an outrage like Mount Manda, they will be convinced that they can mount any attack at will and we will not respond. I disagree, Parvateshwar said. Kanakala _ they have mounted terrorist attacks because they are scared that they cannot take us on in a direct fight. They are afraid that they cannot withstand our superior technology and war machines. I am only thinking about what Lord Shiva had said when he had first come here. Can we try talking to them before we fight? This may be an opportunity to get them to admit that there are sections in their society who are terrorists. If they hand them over, we may even find of coexisting. I don't think Shiva thinks like that anymore, said Parvateshwar, pointing towards the Nilkanth _ he too wants vengeance. Shiva sat silently, his face expressionless. Only his eyes glowered with the terrible anger seething within. My lord, said Kanakala looking towards Shiva, her hands folded in an amast. See, I hope that at least you understand what I am trying to say. Even Brahaspati would have wanted us to avoid violence. If possible, the last sentence had an effect on Shiva similar to a torrential downpour on a raging fire. He turned Kanakala and gazed into her eyes, before turning towards Daksha. Your Highness, what Kanakala says is right. Perhaps we can send an emissary to Swadweep to give them an opportunity to atone for their sins. Striving for a peaceful resolution will help in avoiding the deaths of innocents. However, IMMORTALS still suggest that we begin war preparations. We should be prepared for the possibility that the Chandravanshis may reject our offer. The Mahadev has spoken, said Daksha. I propose that this be the decision of the War Council. All in favor, raise your hands. Every hand in the room was raised. The die had been cast. There would be an attempt at peace. If that didn't work, the Meluhans would attack. I have failed again, Bhadra cried Shiva. I can't protect anyone in need. Shiva was sitting next to Veerbhadra, in a private section of his palace courtyard. A deeply worried Sati had invited Veerbhadra to try and pull Shiva out of his mourning. Shiva had retreated into a shell, not speaking, not crying. She hoped her husband's childhood friend would succeed where she had failed. How can you blame yourself, Shiva? Asked Veerbhadra. handing over the chillum to his friend. How can this be your fault? Shiva picked up the chillum and took a deep drag. The marijuana coursed through his body, but did not help. The pain was too intense. Shiva snorted in disgust and threw the chillum away. As tears flooded his eyes, he looked up at the sky and swore, "I will avenge you, my brother. Even if it is the last thing I do. Even if I have to spend every moment of the rest of my life doing so. Even if I have to come back to this world again and again. I will avenge you." Veerbhadra turned towards Sati sitting in the distance, a worried look on his face. Sati got up and walked towards them. She came up to Shiva and held him tight, resting his tired head against her bosom, hoping to soothe Shiva's tortured soul. To Sati's surprise, Shiva did not raise his arms to wrap them around her. He just sat motionless. Breathing intermittently, my lord, cried a surprised Vraka, as he stood to attention. Respectfully, so did the 24 other brigadiers, for the Nilkanth had just been announced into the war room. Parvatshwar rose slowly. He spoke kindly as he knew the pain Shiva still carried about Prahaspati III's grisly death. "How are you, Shiva?" "I am all right, thank you." We were discussing battle plans." "I know," said Shiva. "I was wondering if I could join in." "Of course," said Parvatshwar, as he moved his chair to the side. "The essential problem for us," said Parvatshwar, trying to quickly bring Shiva up to speed, "is the transport links between Meluha and Swadweep. There aren't any, right?" "Right," answered Patviteshwar. After their last defeat at our hands 100 years ago, the Chandravanshis destroyed the entire infrastructure that then existed between Meluha and Swadweep. They depopulated their border cities and moved them deeper into their empire. Forests grew where cities and roads once were. There is no river that flows from our territory into theirs. Basically, there is no way our huge, technologically superior war machines can be transported to the borders of Swadweep. "That was their intention, obviously," said Shiva. "Your superiority is technology. Their superiority is their numbers. They have negated your strength." "Exactly. And if our war machines are taken out of the equation, our 100,000 strong army may get inundated by their million soldiers." "They have a million strong army?" asked Shiva, incredulous. "Yes, my lord," said Vraka. "We can't are absolutely sure, but that is our estimate. However, we also estimate that the regulars in their army would not be more than 100,000. The rest would be part-timers. Essentially, people such as small traders, artisans, farmers and anyone without influence. They would be forcibly conscripted and used as cannon fodder." "Disgusting," said Parvatshwar, "risking the lives of Shudras and Vaishyas for a job that should be done by Kshatriyas. Their Kshatriyas have no honor." Shiva looked towards Parvatshwar and nodded. "Can't we dismantle our war machines, carry them to Swadweep and reassemble them?" "Yes we can," said, "but that is technically possible only for a few. Our most devastating machines, which would give us the edge, like the long-range catapult, cannot be assembled outside a factory." "The long-range catapult?" "Yes," answered Parvatshwar. "It can hurl huge boulders and smoldering barrels over distances of more than a kilometer. If used effectively they can soften, even devastate, the enemy lines before our cavalry and infantry begin their charge. Basically, the role that elephants used to play earlier." "Then why not use elephants?" "They are unpredictable. No matter how effectively you train them, an army often loses control over them in the heat of the battle. In fact, in the previous war with the Swadweepans, it was their own elephants who brought about their downfall." "Really?" asked Shiva. "Yes," answered Parvatshwar. "Our ploy of firing at the mahouts and generating tremendous noise with our war drums worked. The Chandravanshi elephants panicked and ran into their own army, shattering their lines, especially the ones composed of irregulars. All we had to do then was charge in and finish the IMMORTALS. No elephants then. Absolutely, said Parvates. So we need something that we can carry along with us and which can be used to soften their irregulars in order to negate their numerical superiority. Parvates nodded. Shiva looked towards the window, where a stiff morning breeze was making the leaves flutter. The leaves were green. Shiva stared harder. They remained green. I know, said Shiva, looking at Patviteshwar suddenly, his face luminescent. Why don't we use arrows? Arrows, asked a surprised Parvateshwar. Archery was the battle art of the most elite Kshatriyas, used for one-on-one duels. However, Smas one-on-one duels could only be fought between warriors of equal chosen tribes. This skill was reduced to being a demonstration art for the creme de la creme. Archers aimed huge respect for their rare skill, but they were not decisive in battles. There had been a time when bows and arrows were crucial in war strategies as weapons of mass destruction. That was the time of the Dejyastras. Many of these astras were usually released through arrows. However, with the ban on Dejyastras many thousands of years ago by Lord Rudra, the effectiveness of archery units in large-scale battles had reduced drastically. How can that reduce the numerical superiority, my lord? Asked Vreka. Even the most skilled among the archers will take at least 5 seconds to aim, fire and execute a kill. He will not be able to kill more than 12 a minute. We have only 100 Kshatriyas who are of the gold order of archers. The rest can shoot, but their aim cannot be relied upon. So we will not be able to kill more than 1,100 of our enemies per minute. Certainly not Emda against the Chandravanshis. I am not talking about using arrows for one-on-one shooting, said Shiva. I am talking about using them for softening the enemy, as weapons of mass destruction. Disregarding the confused expressions of his audience, Shiva continued, let me explain. Suppose we create a corps of archers of the lower Kshatriya chosen tribes. But their aim wouldn't be good, said Vreka. That doesn't matter. Let us say we have at least 5,000 such archers. Suppose we train them to just get the range right. Forget about the aim. Suppose their job is to just keep firing arrows in the general direction of the Chandravanshi army. If they don't have to aim, they can fire a lot more quickly. Maybe one arrow every 2 or 3 seconds. Parvateshwar narrowed his eyes as the brilliance of the idea struck him. The rest of his brigadiers were still trying to gather their thoughts. Think about it, said Shiva. \VE would have 5,000 arrows raining down on the Chandravanshis every 2 seconds. Suppose we can keep this up for 10 minutes. An almost continuous shower of arrows. Their irregulars would break. The arrows would have the same effect as that of the elephants in the last war. Brilliant, cried Vreka. Perhaps, mused Parvateshwar, our archers could be trained to release the arrows lying on their backs while holding up the bow with their feet. No doubt, accuracy would be somewhat compromised. But the effect would be far more deadly. Excellent, exclaimed Shiva. Because then the bows can be bigger. And the range longer. And the arrows bigger and thicker, almost like small spears, continued Parvateshwar. Strong enough to even penetrate leather and thick wooden shields. Only the soldiers with metal shields, like the regulars, would be safe from this. Do we have our answer? Asked Shiva. Yes, we do, answered with a smile. He turned towards Vreka. Create this corps. I want 5,000 men ready within 2 weeks. It will be done, my lord, said Vreka. What do you want to talk about, Shiva? Asked Parvateshwar, as he entered the metallurgy factory. He was accompanied by Vaka and Prasenjit. Just as Shiva had requested, Vreka had reluctantly left the archery corps he had been training over the past week. However, he had been motivated to attend in expectation of another brilliant idea from the Nilkanth. He was not disappointed. I was thinking, said Shiva, we would still need an equivalent of your stabbing ram to break their center. The center is where I assume their general would place their regulars. As long as they hold, our victory cannot be guaranteed. Right, said, and we have to assume that these soldiers would be disciplined enough to stay in formation despite the barrage of arrows. Exactly, said Shiva. We can't transport the ram, right? No, we can't, my lord, said Vraka. How about if we try to create a human ram? Go ahead, said Parvati slowly, listening intently. Say we align the soldiers into a square of 20 men by 20 men, said Shiva. We can have each one of them use his shield to cover the left half of his own body and the right half of the soldier to the left of him. That will allow them to push their spear through, from in between the shields, said Parvati. Exactly, said Shiva. And the soldiers behind can use their shields as a lid to cover themselves as well as the soldier in front. This formation would eye like a tortoise, with the shields holding against any attack, much like a tortoise shell. The enemy will not be able to break through, but our spears will cut into them. We could have the strongest and most experienced soldiers in the front to make sure that the tortoise is well led, said Praisaniat_no, said Parvati_ position the most experienced at the back and at the sides, to make sure that the square doesn't break in case the younger soldiers panic. This entire formation works only if the team stays together. Right, said Shiva, smiling at Parvati's quick insight. And what if, instead of the usual spears, they carried this? Shiva raised a weapon that he had designed and the army metallurgy team had quickly assembled. Parvati marveled at the simple brilliance of it. It had the body of a spear, but its head had been broadened. Onto the broadened head, 2 more spikes had been added, to the left and right of the main spear spike. Assaulting an enemy with this weapon would be like striking him with 3 spears at the same time. Absolutely brilliant, Shiva marveled. Parvati_what do you call it? I call it a Trishul_Praisenal, said Parvati_. You are in charge of creating this core. I want at least 5 tortoise formations ED by the time we march. I will assign 2,000 men to you for this. It will I done, my lord, said Praisaniat with a military salute. Parvati gazed at Shiva with respect. He knew that Shiva's ideas were brilliant, and the fact that he had come up with these tactics despite his profound personal grief was worthy of admiration. Maybe what the others say about Shiva could be true. Maybe he is the man who will finish Lord Ram's task. Parvati hoped that Shiva would not prove him wrong. Ksata at Shiva sat in the royal meeting room, with Daksha and Patviteshwar at his side. 2 legendary Arishtani brigadiers, Vidyanmali and Mayashrenik, sat at a distance. A muscular and once proud man stood in front of Shiva, pleading with folded hands. Give me a chance, my lord, said Drapaku_. If the law has been changed, then why can't we fight? Drapaku was the man whose blind father had blessed Shiva in Kotwa_. He had been a brigadier in the Meluhan army before the disease which blinded his father had also killed his wife and unborn child. He had been declared a Vikama along with his father. But Shiva refused to be rushed. Tell me, Drapaku, how is your father? He is well, my lord. And he will disown me if I don't support you in this Dermaoid. Shiva smiled softly. He believed this was a Dvarmaudp, a hob war. But Drapaku, who will take care of him if something were to happen to you? Meluha will take care of him, my lord. But he would die 1,000 deaths if I didn't go to battle with you. I had kind of a son would I be if I didn't fight for my father's honor? For my Count's honor? Shiva still seemed a little unsure. He could sense the discomfort of the others in the room. It had not escaped his notice that despite the repeal of the Vikama law, nobody had touched Drapaku when he had entered. My lord, we are outnumbered heavily by the Chandravanshis, continued Drapaku_. We need every trained warrior we have. There are at least 5,000 soldiers who can't battle since they have been declared Vikama_. I can bring them together. We are willing, and eager, to die for our country. I don't want you to die for Meluha, brave Drapaku, said Shiva. Drapaku's face fell instantly. He too thought he would be returning home to Kotwa_. However, continued Shiva, I would like it if you killed for Meluha. Drapaku, upraise your brigade, Drapaku ordered Shiva. Coming towards Daksha, he continued, We will call it the Vaikama Brigade. How can we have Vaikamas in our army? This is ridiculous. Gled Vidi Unmeli and Maya Shrenik were in their private gym, preparing for their regular sword training. Vidayu____2 cajoled Maya Shrenik. Don't Vidayu me, Maya. You know this is wrong. The usually calm Maya Shrenik just nodded and let his impetuous friend vent his frustration. How will I face my ancestors if I die in this battle? Asked Vidi Unmeli. What will I answer if they ask me how I let a non-Kshatriya fight a battle that only weak Kshatriyas should have fought? It is our duty to protect the weak. We are not supposed to use the weak to fight for Vidayu. I don't think Drapaku is weak. Have you forgotten his valor in the previous Chandravanshi war? He is a Vaikama. That makes him weak. Lord Shiva has decreed that there are no Vaikamas anymore. I don't think the Nilkanth truly knows right from wrong. Vidayu, shouted Maya Shrenik. Vidi Unmeli was surprised by the outburst. If the Nilkanth says it is right, continued Maya Shrenik, then it is right. Chapter 22 Empire of Evil. This is the military formation that I think is ideal for the battle, said Parvateshwar_Vreka, and Parvateshwar were sitting in the general's private office. The formation was that of a bow. The soldiers would be arranged in a wide semicircular pattern. The slower corps, like the tortoises, would be placed at the center. The flanks would comprise quicker units such as the light infantry. The cavalry would be at both ends of the bow, ready to be deployed anywhere on the battlefield or to ride along the sides of the bow for protection. The bow formation was ideal for a smaller army. It provided flexibility without sacrificing strength. It is ideal, my lord, said Vreka. What does the Mahadev have to say? Shiva thinks it suits our requirements perfectly. Vreka did not like it when Parvateshwar referred to the Nilkanth by his name. But who was he to correct his general? See, I agree, my I will lead the left flank, said Parvateshwar_, and Pu lead the right. Which is why I need your opinion on some tactics. Me, my lord, asked an astonished Vreka. I thought the Mahadev would lead the other. Shiva. No, I don't think he would be fighting this war, Vreka. Vreka looked up in surprise. But he remained silent. Parvateshwar probably felt the need to explain, for he continued speaking. He is a GCH3D and capable man, no doubt. But the uppermost desire in his mind is retribution, not justice for Meluha_. We will help him wreak vengeance when we throw the guilty Naga at his feet. He won't be putting his own life at risk in only to find one Naga_. Vreka kept his eyes low, lest they betray the fact that he disagreed with his chief. To be fair, said Parvateshwar_, we cannot impose on him just because he has a blue throat. I respect him a lot, but I don't expect him to fight. What reason would there be for him to do that? Vreka looked up at Parvateshwar for a brief instant. Why was his general refusing to accept what was so obvious to everyone? Was he so attached to Lord Ram that he couldn't believe that another savior had arrived on earth? Did he actually believe that Indram could be the Owned One? Hadn't Lord Ram himself said that he is replaceable, only Dharma is irreplaceable? Furthermore, continued Parvateshwar, he is married now. He is obviously in love. He is not going to risk Sati being bereaved again. Why should he? It's unfair of us to demand this of him. Vreka thought to himself, while not daring to voice his opinion. The Mahadev will fight for all of us, General. He will battle to protect us. Why? Because that is what Mahadevs do. Vreka was not aware that Parvateshwar was hoping for something similar in his mind. He too wished that Shiva would rise to be a Mahadev and lead them to victory against the Chandravanshis. However, Parvateshwar had learned through long years of experience that while many men tried to rise up to Lord Ram's stature, none had ever succeeded. Parvateshwar had laid hopes on a few such men in his youth, and he had always been disillusioned at the end. He was simply preparing himself for another such expected disappointment from Shiva. He didn't plan to be left without a backup if Shiva refused to fight the battle against the Chandravanshis. The War Council sat silently as Daksha read the letter that had come back from Swadweep from the court of Emperor Dilipar. Daksha's reaction upon reading the letter left no doubt as to the message it contained. He shut his eyes, his face contorted in rage, his fist clenched tight. He handed the letter over to Kanakala and sneered, "Read it. Read it out loud so that the whole world may be sickened by the repugnance of the Chandravanshis." Kanakala frowned slightly before taking the letter and reading it out loud. Emperor Daksha, Surivanshi liege, protector of Meluha. Please accept my deep condolences for the dastardly attack on Mount Mundal. Such a senseless assault on peaceful Brahmins cannot but be condemned in the strongest of terms. We are shocked that any denizen of India would stoop to such levels. It is, therefore, with surprise and sadness that I read your letter. I assure you that neither me nor anyone in my command has anything to do with this devious attack. Hence I have to inform you, with regret, that there is nobody I can hand over to you. I hope that you understand the sincerity of this letter and will not make a hasty decision, which may have regrettable consequences for you. I assure you of my empire's full support in the investigation of this outrage. Please do inform us as to how we can be of assistance to you. Banging the criminals to Yasls. Kanakala took a deep breath to compose herself. The anger over the typically Chandravanshi-like doubly talk was washing all over her, making her regret her earlier stand. "Is personally signed by the Emperor Dilipar," said Kanakala, completing her reading of the letter. Not Emperor Dilipar, growled a fuming Daksha. "Tenvrist Dilipar of the Empire of Evil War," arose a cry from the council, unanimous in its rage. Daksha over at a scowling Shiva who nodded imperceptibly. "War it is," bellowed Daksha. "We march in 2 weeks." The bracelet seemed to develop a life of its own. It had swelled to enormous proportions, dwarfed and shiver its edges we engulfed by gigantic flames. The 3 colossal serpents, which formed the arm, separated from each other and slithered towards Shiva. The one in the center, while nodding towards the snake on its left, hissed, "He got your and the other one you'll soon get your wife." The left and right scowled Ario. Shiva pointed his finger Menakdevi at the serpent in the center. "You dare touch even a hair on her and I will hash your soul out of." "But I," continued the serpent, not even acknowledging Shiva's threat, "I'm saving myself, I'm saving myself for you." Shiva stared at the repent with impotent rage. "T will get you," said the as its mouth opened wide, ready to swallow him whole. Shiva's eyes suddenly opened wide. He was perspiring profusely. He looked around, but couldn't see a thing. It was extraordinarily dark. He reached out for Sati, to check if she was safe. She wasn't there. He was up in a flash, feeling a chill in his heart, almost expecting that the serpents had escaped his dreams and transformed into reality. "Shiva," said Sati, looking at him. She was sitting at the edge of the bed. The tiny military tent they slept in could not afford the luxury of chairs. This tent had been their traveling home for the last 1 month as the Meluhan army marched towards. "What is it, Sati?" asked Shiva, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. He slipped the offending bracelet that he was tightly holding back into his pouch. "When had one taken it out?" Shiva continued. Sati. She had tried to talk about this for the last 2 weeks. Ever since she had been sure of the news, she had not found an opportune moment. She had always managed to convince herself that this was minor news and it would not be right for her to trouble her husband with this, especially when he was going through one of the worst phases of his life. But it was too late now. He had to learn from her and not someone else. News like this did not remain secret in an army camp for long. "I have something to tell you." "Yes," said Shiva, though his dream still rankled. "What is it?" "I don't think I will be able to fight in the war." "What? Why?" asked a startled Shiva. He knew that cowardice was a word that did not exist in Sati's dictionary. Then why was she saying this? "And why now?" when the army had already marched for nearly a month through the dense forests that separated Meluha from Swadweep. They were already in enemy territory. There was no turning back. "Sati, this is not like you." Shiva said, an embarrassed Sati. Such discussions were always difficult for the somewhat prudish Suryavanshis. "I have my reasons." "Reasons?" asked Shiva. /I had _ Suddenly the reason smacked Shiva like a silent thunderbolt. "My God! Are you sure?" "Yes," said Sati, bashful by the holy lake. "Am I going to be a father?" Seeing the ecstasy on Shiva's face, Sati felt a pang of guilt that she hadn't informed him earlier. Wow, WHCH3PED thrilled Shiva as he swilled around with her in his arms. "This is the best news I have heard in a long time." Sati smiled warmly and rested her head on his tired but strong shoulders. "We will name our daughter after the one who has been the greatest comfort to you in the last Evo months, while I have been of no help," said Shiva. "We will name her Kritika." Sati looked up in surprise. She didn't believe that it was possible to love him even more. But it was. She smiled. "It could be a son, Puno." Grinned Shiva. "It will be a daughter. And I'll spoil her to high heavens." Sati laughed heartily. Shiva joined in. His first spirited laugh in over 2 months. He embraced Sati, feeling the negative energy dissipate from his being. "I love you, Sati." "I love you too," she whispered. Shiva raised the curtain to come out of the tent that Sati was ensconced in. Kritika and Ayutvati were with her. A retinue of nurses attended to her every need. Shiva had been obsessive about the health of his unborn child, questioning Ayutvati incessantly about every aspect of Sati's well-being. The Suryavanshis had moved valiantly for nearly 3 months. The path had been more challenging than expected. The forest had reclaimed its original habitat with alarming ferocity. The army was attacked by wild animals and disease at every turn. They had lost 2,000 men. And not one to the enemy. After weeks of hacking and marching, the scouts had finally managed to lead the Suryavanshi army to the Chandravanshis. The Chandravanshis were camped on a sweeping plain called Dermakhet. Their choice was clever. It was an expansive field that had enough room to allow the Chandravanshis to maneuver the million-strong army. The full weight of their numerical superiority would come into play. The Suryavanshi army had tried to wait out the Chandravanshis, to test if they would lose patience and attack in a less advantageous area. But the Chandravanshis had held firm. Finally, the Suryavanshis moved camp to an easily defendable valley close to Dermakhet. Shiva looked up at the clear sky. A lone eagle flew overhead, circling the royal camp, while 5 pigeons flew lower, unafraid of the eagle, a strange sign. His gunner shaman would have probably said that it's a bad time for battle, as the pigeons clearly have a hidden advantage. Don't think about it. It is all nonsense in any case. Breathing in the fresh morning air deeply, he turned right, towards Emperor Daksha's tent. Nandi was walking towards him. "What is it, Nandi?" "I was just coming towards your tent, my lord. The emperor requests your presence. There's been a troubling development." Shiva and Nandi hurried towards Daksha's tastefully appointed royal tent. They entered to find Daksha and Parvati were engrossed in a discussion. Vraka, Mayashrenik and Drapaku sat at a distance. Drapaku was a little further away from the rest. "This is a disaster," groaned Daksha. "Your Highness," asked Shiva. "My lord. I'm glad you're here. We face complete disaster." "Please not use words like that, Your Highness," said Shiva. Turning towards Parvati, he asked, "So your suspicions were correct?" "Yes," said the scouts. Lust resumed a few minutes back. There was a reason why the Chandravanshis were to mobilize. They have dispatched 100,000 soldiers in a great arc around our position. They will enter our valley by tomorrow morning. Weeks will be sandwiched between the main force ahead of us and another 100,000 behind us. We can't fight on two fronts, cried Daksha. What do we do? Was it Veerbhadra's scouts who returned with the news? Asked Shiva. Parvateshwar nodded. Shiva turned towards Nandi, who rushed out immediately. Moments later, Veerbhadra stood before them. What route is the Chandravanshi detachment taking, Bhadra? Asked Shiva. To the east, along the steep mountains on our side. I think they intend to enter our valley some 50 kilometers up north. Did you take a cartographer with you as Parvateshwar had instructed? Veerbhadra nodded, moved to the center table and laid out the map on it. Shiva and Parvateshwar leaned across. Pointing to the route with his fingers, Veerbhadra said, this way. Shiva suddenly started as he noticed the ideal defensive position on the map, deep north of the Surivanshi camp. He looked up at Parvateshwar. The same thought had occurred to the general. How many men do you think, Parvateshwar? Difficult to say. It will be tough. But the pass looks defendable. It will need a sizable contingent though. At least 30,000. But we can't spare too many men. I am sure the battle with the main Chandravanshi army to the south will also happen tomorrow. It would be the best time for them to take up positions. Parvateshwar nodded grimly. The Meluhans might just have to retreat and maneuver for a battle from another, more advantageous position, he thought unhappily. I think 5,000 men ought to do it. My lords. Shiva and Parvateshwar had not noticed Drapaku move to the table. He was examining the pass that Shiva had just pointed out. Look here, continued Drapaku, as Shiva and Parvateshwar peered. The mountains ahead constrict rapidly towards this pass, which is not more than 50 meters across. It doesn't matter how big their army is, each charge by the enemy into the pass cannot comprise more than a few hundred men. But Drapaku, with 100,000 men, they can launch one charge after another, almost continuously, said Myashrenik. And with the mountains being so steep on the sides, you can't use any of our missiles. Victory is almost impossible. It's not about victory, said Drapaku. It's about holding them for a day so that our main army can fight. I will do it, said Parvateshwar. No, my lord, said Vraka. You are required for the main charge. Shiva looked up at Parvateshwar. I need to be here as well. I can't do it either, said Shiva, shaking his head. Parvateshwar looked up at Shiva, disillusionment writ large on his face. While he had prepared his heart for disappointment, he had hoped that Shiva would prove him wrong. But it appeared clear to Parvateshwar that Shiva TCHD would be simply watching the battle from the Vyksvam platform being constructed for Daksha. Give me the honor, my lord, said Drapaku. Drapaku whispered Myashrenik, not putting into words what everyone else knew. With only 5,000 soldiers, the battle at the northern pass against the Chandravanshi detachment was a suicide mission. Drapaku, said Shiva. I don't know if I know, my lord, interrupted Drapaku. It is my destiny. I will hold them for one day. If Lord Indra supports me, I'll even try for two. Get us victory by then. Daksha suddenly interjected. Wonderful. Drapaku, make preparations to leave immediately. Drapaku saluted smartly and rushed out before any second thoughts were voiced. Ksata 4 at in less than an hour the Vaikama brigade was seen marching out of the camp. The sun was high up in the sky and practically the entire camp was awake, watching the soldiers set out on their mission. Everyone knew the terrible odds the Vaikamas were going to face. They knew that it was unlikely that any of these soldiers would be seen alive again. The soldiers, though, did not exhibit the slightest hesitation or hint of fear, as they marched on. The camp stood in silent awe. One thought reverberated throughout. How could the Vikamsach be so magnificent? They are supposed to be weak. Drapaku was at the lead, his handsome face smeared with war paint. On top of his armor, he wore a saffron angvastram _ the color of the Paramatma _ the color worn for the final journey. He didn't expect to return. He stopped suddenly as Vidyanmali darted in front of him. Drapaku frowned. Before he could react, Vidyanmali had drawn his knife. Drapaku reached for his sidearm. But Vidyanmali was quicker. He sliced his own thumb across the blade, and brought it up to Drapaku's forehead. In the tradition of the great brother warriors of yore, Vidyanmali smeared his blood across Drapaku III's brow, signifying that his blood will protect him. "You're a better man than I am," Drapaku whispered Vidyanmali. Drapaku stood silent, astonished by Vidyanmali's uncharacteristic behavior. Raising his bald fist high, Vidyanmali roared, "Give them hell, Vaikama! Give them hell, Vaikama!" Three bellowed the Surivanshis, repeating it again and again. Drapaku and his soldiers looked around the camp, absorbing the respect that they had been denied for so long. Way too long. "Give them hell, Vaikama!" Three. Drapaku nodded, tummed and marched on before his emotions the moment. His soldiers followed. "Give them hell, Vaikama!" It was an uncharacteristically warm morning for that time of the year. The Chandravanshi detachment had been surprised to find Meluhan soldiers at the northern pass the previous night. They had immediately attacked. The Vaikamas had valiantly held the pass through the night, buying precious time for the main Surivanshi army. This bad to the day of the main battle. Shiva was prepared. Sati stood resplendent as she looped the artillery in small circles around Shiva's face. She stopped after 7 turns, took some vermilion on her thumb and smeared it up Shiva's forehead in a long tilak. "Come back victorious or don't come back at all." Shiva raised one eyebrow and grimaced. "What kind of a send-off is that?" "What? No, it's just," stammered Sati. I know," smiled Shiva as he embraced Sati. "It's the traditional Surivanshi send-off before a war, right?" Sati looked up with moist eyes. Her love for Shiva was overcoming decades of Surivanshi training. "Just come back safe and sound." "I will, my love," whispered Shiva. "You mdnt get rid of me so easily?" Sati smiled weakly. "I'll be waiting." She up on her toes and kissed Shiva lightly. Shiva kissed her back and tummed quickly, before his heart could fill his head with second thoughts. Lifting the tent curtain, he walked out. His eyes scanned the skies, keenly looking for omens. There were none. Bloody good. The distant drone of Sanskrit shlokas, accompanied by the beating of war drums in a smooth rhythmic pulse, wafted in over the dry winter breeze. This particular Surivanshi custom had appeared odd to Shilpa. But maybe there was something to the Brahmin call for Indra and Agni, as this puja was called. The effect of the beats and the incantations were akin to a clarion call, rousing a fierce spirit amongst the warriors. The beats would quicken once the battle began. Shiva was eager to throw himself into the battle. He tummed and strode towards Daksha's tent. "Greetings, Your Highness," said Shiva as he raised the curtain to enter the royal tent, where Parvateshwar was explaining the plans to the emperor. "Namast." Parvateshwar smiled and folded his hands. "What news of Drapaku, Patviteshwar?" asked Shiva. "The last dispatch I heard is at least 3 hours old." 3. The Vaikama battle is on. Drapaku still leads them. He has bought us invaluable time. May Lord Ram bless him. "Yes," agreed Shiva. "May Lord Ram bless him. He just has to hold on till the end of this day, my lord," said Daksha, hands folded in a formal namast, head bowed. "It is an auspicious beginning. We will have a good day. Wouldn't you agree?" "Yes, it does seem so," smiled Shiva. "The news of Drapaku is very welcome. But perhaps this question may be better suited for the 4th Prahar, Your Highness." "I am sure the answer would be the same, my lord. By the 4th Prahar today, Emperor Dilipar will be standing in front of us, in chains, waiting for justice to be delivered." "Careful, Her Highness said Shiva with a smile. Let us not tempt fate. We still have to win the war. We will face no problems. We have the Nilkanth with us. We just need to attack. Victory is guaranteed. I think a little more than a blue throat will be required to beat the Chandravanshis, Her Highness said Shiva, his smile even broader. We shouldn't underestimate our enemy. I don't underestimate them, my lord. But I will not make the mistake of underestimating you either. Shiva gave up. He had learned that it was impossible to win a debate when pitched against Daksha's unquestioning conviction. Perhaps I should leave, Your Highness said Parvateshwar. The time has come. With your Pemazlan of course, Parvateshwar 6J0 above said Daksha. Tumming towards Shiva, Daksha continued, my lord, they have built a viewing platform for us on the hill at the back. Viewing platform, asked Shiva, perplexed. Yes. Why don't we watch the battle from there? You would also be in a better position to direct it. Shiva narrowed his eyes in surprise. Your Highness, my position is with the soldiers. On the battlefield. Parvateshwar stopped in his tracks. Startled and delighted with having been proved wrong. My lord, this is a ayab for butchers, not the Nilkanth, said a concerned Daksha. You don't need to sully your hands with Chandravanshi blood. Parvateshwar will arrest that Naga and throw him at your feet. You can extract such a terrible retribution from him that his entire tribe would dread per justice for eons. This is not about my revenge, Your Highness. It is about the vengeance of Meluha. It would be petty of me to think that an entire war is being fought just for me. This is a war between good and evil. A battle in which one has to choose a side. And fight. There are no bystanders in a damned wood. It is a bob war. Parvateshwar watched Shiva intently, his eyes blazing with admiration. These were Lord Ram's words. Then are no bystanders in a Dharmdyud, my lord. We can't afford to risk your life, pleaded Daksha. You are too important. I am sure that we can win this, taking that gamble. Your presence has inspired us. There are many who are willing to shed their blood for you. If they are willing to shed their blood for me, then I must be willing to shed my blood for them. Parvateshwar's heart was swamped by the greatest joy an accomplished Surivanshi could feel. The joy of finally finding a man worth following, the joy of finding a man worth being inspired by. The joy of finding a man, deserving of being spoken of in the same breath, as Lord Ram himself. A worried Daksha came close to Shiva. He realized that if he had to stop the Nilkanth from this foolhardiness, he would have to speak his mind. He whispered softly, my lord, you are my daughter's husband. If something were to happen to you, she would be bereaved twice in one life. I can't let that happen to her. Nothing will happen, whispered Shiva. And Sati would die 1,000 deaths if her husband stayed away from a Dharmdyud. She would lose respect for me. If she weren't pregnant, she would have been fighting alongside me, shoulder to shoulder. You know that. Daksha stared at Shiva, troubled and apprehensive. Shiva smiled warmly. Nothing will happen, Your Highness. And what if it does? Then it should be remembered that it happened for a good cause. Sati would be proud of. Daksha continued to stare at Shiva, his face a portrait of agonized distress. Forgive me, Your Highness, but I must go, said Shiva with a formal namaste, tumming to leave. Parvateshwar followed distracted, as if commanded by a higher force. As Shiva walked briskly out of the tent towards his horse, he heard Parvateshwar's voice. My lord. Shiva continued walking. My lord, bellowed Parvateshwar again, more insistent. Shiva stopped abruptly. He tummed, a surprised frown on his face. I am sorry, Parvateshwar. I thought you were calling out to His Highness. No, my lord, said Parvateshwar. It was you I called. His frown deepened as Shiva asked, what is the matter, brave general? Parvateshwar came to a halt in rigid military attention. He kept a polite distance from Shiva. He could not stand on the hallowed ground that cradled the Mahadev. As if in a daze, Parvati slowly curled his fist and brought it up to his chest. And then, completing the formal Meluhan salute, he bowed low. Lower than he had ever bowed before a living man. As low as he bowed before Lord Ram's idol during his regular momming pujas. Shiva continued to stare at Parvati, his face an odd mixture of surprise and embarrassment. Shiva's respect for made him uncomfortable with such idolatry. Rising but with his head still bent, Parvati whispered, "See, I will be honored to shed my blood with you, my lord." Raising his head, he repeated, "Honored." Shiva smiled and touched arm. "Well, if our plans are good, my friend, hopefully we won't have to shed too much of it." Chapter 23 Dermaod, the Holy War. The Surivanshis were arranged like a bow. Strong, yet flexible. The recently raised tortoise regiments had been placed at the center. The light infantry formed the flanks, while the cavalry, in turn, bordered them. The chariots had been abandoned due to the unseasonal rain the previous night. They couldn't risk the wheels getting stuck in the slush. The newly reared archer regiments remained stationed at the back. Skillfully designed backrests had been fabricated for them, which allowed the archers to lie on theelbacks and guide their feet with an ingenious system of gears. The bows could be stretched across their feet and the strings drawn back up to their chins, releasing powerfully built arrows, almost the size of small spears. As they were behind the Suravanshi infantry, their presence was hidden from the Chandra/Ranshis. The superior numerical strength of the Chandravanshis was apparent in the standard offensive formation in which their army was deployed. Their massive infantry was arranged in squads of 5,000. There were 50 such squads, compassing a full legion in a straight line. They stretched as far as the eye could see. There were 3 additional legions behind the first one, ready to finish off the job. This formation allowed a direct assault onto a numerically inferior enemy, giving the offense tremendous strength and solidity, but also making it rigid. The squads left spaces in between for the cavalry to charge if required. A study of the Surivanshi formation had made the Chandravanshis move their cavalry from the rear to the flanks. This would enable a quicker charge at the flanks of the Surivanshi formation and disrupt enemy lines. The Chandravanshi general had clearly read the ancient war manuals and following them religiously, page by page. It would have been a perfect move against an enemy who also followed standard tactics. Unfortunately, he was up against a Tibetan tribal chief whose innovations had transformed the Surivanshi attack. As Shiva rode towards the hillock at the edge of the main battlefield, the Brahmins increased the tempo of Theel shlokas while the war drums pumped the energy to a higher level. Despite being outnumbered on a vast scale, the Surivanshis did not exhibit even the slightest hint of nervousness. They had buried their fear deep. The war cries of the clan gods of the various brigades rent the air. Indra Devki Iai. Agni Devki Iai. Jai Shakti Deviki. Varun Devki Jail Jai Pawan Devki. But these cries were forgotten in an instant as the soldiers saw a magnificent white steed canter in over the hillock carrying a handsome, muscular figure. A thunderous roar pierced the sky, loud enough to force the gods out of their cloud palaces to peer at the events unfolding below. The Neelkanth raised his hand in acknowledgement. Following him was General Parvati, accompanied by Nandi and Veerbhadra_Vraka was off his horse in a flash as Shiva approached him. Parvati dismounted equally rapidly and was next to Vraka before Shiva could reach him. "The Lord will lead the right flank," Brigadier said. Parvati "I hope that is all right. It will be my honor to fight under his command, my lord," said a beaming Vraka. He immediately pulled out his field commander baton from the grip on his side, went down on one knee and raised his hand high, to hand over the charge to Shiva. "You people have to stop doing this," said Shiva laughing. "You embarrass me." Pulling Vraka up on his feet, Shiva embraced him tightly. "I am your friend, not your lord." A startled Vraka stepped back, his soul unable to handle the gush of positive energy flowing in. He mumbled, "Yes, my lord." Shaking his head softly, Shiva smiled. He gently the baton from Vraca's extended hand and raised it high, for the entire Surya/Ranchi army to see. An ear-splitting cry ripped through the ranks. Mahadev! 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 Shiva vaulted onto his horse in one smooth arc. Holding the baton high, he rode up and down the line. The Suryavanshi roar got louder and louder. Mahadev! 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 Suryavanshis, bellowed Shiva, raising his hand. Meluhans! Hear me! The army quietened down to hear their living god. Who is a Mahadev? Roared Shiva. They listened in rapt attention, hanging on to every word. Does he sit on a pitiable height and look on idly while ordinary men do what should be his job? No. Some soldiers were praying inaudibly. Does he lazily bestow his blessings while others fight for the good? Does he stand by nonchalantly and count the dead while the living sacrifice themselves to destroy evil? No. There was pin-drop silence as the Suryavanshis absorbed their Nilkantha's message. A man becomes a Mahadev when he fights for GCH3D_. A Mahadev is not in as one from his mother's womb. He is forged in the heat of battle, when he wages a war to destroy evil. The army stood hushed, feeling a flood of positive energy. I am a Mahadev, bellowed Shiva. A resounding roar arose from the Suryavanshis. They were led by the Mahadu_ the god gods. The Chandravanshis did not stand a chance. But I am not the only one. A shocked silence descended on the Suryavanshis. What did the Mahadev mean? He is not the only one. Do the Chandravanshis also have a god? I am not the only one. For I see 100,000 Mahadevs in front of me. I see 100,000 men willing to fight on the side of good. I see 100,000 men willing to battle evil. I see 100,000 men capable of destroying evil. The stunned Suryavanshis gaped at their Nilkanth as the import of his words permeated their minds. They dared not ask the question, are we gods? Shiva had the answer, Ha-ik Hai Mahadev. The Meluhans stood astounded. Every single one a Mahadev. Ha ha Mahadev, bellowed Shiva. The Meluhans roared. All of us are Mahadevs. Pure primal energy coursed through the veins of each Suryavanshi. They were gods. It didn't matter that the Chandravanshis outnumbered them 10-1. They were gods. Even if the evil Chandravanshis outnumbered them 100-1, victory was assured. They were gods. Ha ha Mahadev, cried the Suryavanshi army. Ha ha Mahadev, yelled Shiva. All of us are gods. Gods on a mission. Drawing his sword, he pulled the reins of his horse. Rising on its hind legs with a ferocious neigh, the horse pirouetted smartly to face the Chandravanshis. Shiva pointed his sword at his enemies. On a mission to destroy evil. The Suryavanshis bellowed after their lord. Ha ha Mahadev. The cry rent the air. Ha ha Mahadev. Victory would not be denied. Ha ha Mahadev. The long spell of evil would end today. Ha ha Mahadev. As the army roared like the gods that they were, Shiva rode on towards a beaming Parvateshwar who was flanked by Nandi, Veerbhadra and Vraca. Nice speech, grinned Veerbhadra. Shiva winked at him. He then turned his horse towards Parvateshwar. General, I think it's time we start our own rainfall 3. Yes, Mind nodded. Parvateshwar tumming his horse around, he gave the orders to his flag bearer. The archers. The flag bearer raised the coded flag. It was red with a vicious black lightning aimed on it. The message was repeated by flag bearers across the lines. The Suryavanshi infantry immediately hunched down on its knees. Shiva, Parvateshwar, Vraca, Nandi and Veerbhadra dismounted rapidly, pulling their horses down to their knees. And the arrows flew in a deadly shower. The archers had been placed in a semicircular formation, to cover as wide a range of the Chandravanshi army as possible. 5,000 archers rained death on the Chandravanshis as the sky turned black with a curtain of arrows. The hapless Swadweapons were easy prey in their tight formations. The arrows, nearly as powerful as short spears, easily penetrated the leather and wooden shields of the irregular Chandravanshi soldiers. Only the regulars held metal shields. Within minutes, the first legion of irregulars had begun to break the line and yield precious ground. They were taking too many casualties to hold on to their position. The irregulars started running back, causing chaos. Confusion reigned in the legions behind Parvateshwartam towards Shiva. "I think we should lengthen the range," my lord. Shiva nodded in reply. Parvateshwar nodded to his flag-bearer who relayed the message. The archers stopped shooting for just a few moments. Tumming their wheels right, they rapidly raised the height of their footrests. With the longer range quickly set, they drew the arrows and let fly. The arrows hit the second legion of the Chandravanshis now. The pincer attack of the retreating first Chandravanshi legion and the concurrent hail of arrows created bedlam in the second legion. Shiva noticed the Chandravanshi cavalry moved into position to attack. He tummed to Parvateshwar, "General, their cavalry is moving out. They would aim to flank us and attack the archers. Our cavalry needs to meet them midfield." "Yes, my lord," said Parvateshwar. "I'd anticipated this move from the Chandravanshis. That's why I had positioned 2 cavalries, led by Myashrenik and Vidyanmeli, on the perfect. But General, our cavalry must not move too far ahead or our arrows will injure our own men. Nor must they retreat. They have to hold their position. At least for another 5 minutes. I agree. Our archers need more time to finish their job." Parvateshwar turned to his flag-bearer with detailed instructions. 2 couriers set off rapidly to the left and right. Within moments, the eastern and western Arishtainimi, led by Myashrenik and Vidyanmeli respectively, thundered out to meet the Chandravanshi counter-attack. Meanwhile, the disarray in the second legion of the Chandravanshi army increased as the unrelentingly ruthless wall of arrows pounded down upon them. The Surivanshi archers, unmindful of their tiring limbs or bleeding hands, bravely continued their unremitting assault. The second legion line started breaking as the Chandravanshis tried desperately to escape the ruthless carnage. "Higher range, my lord?" asked Parvateshwar, preempting Shiva's words. Shiva nodded in reply. Meanwhile the Surivanshi and Chandravanshi cavalries were engaged in fierce combat on the eastern and western ends of the battlefield. The Chandravanshis knew that they had to break through. A few more minutes of the Surivanshi archers' assault and the battle would be all but lost. They fought desperately, like wounded tigers. Swords cut through flesh and bone. Spears pierced body armor. Soldiers, with limbs hanging half-severed, continued to battle away. Horses, with missing riders, attacked as if their own lives depended on it. The Chandravanshis were throwing all their might into breaking through the line that protected the archers. But to their misfortune, they had run into the fiercest brigadiers amongst the Surivanshis. Myashrenik and Vidyanmeli fought ferociously, holding the mammoth Chandravanshi force at bay. The archers meanwhile had begun their onslaught on the third legion of the Chandravanshis. Their legions were either bleeding to death or deserting in great numbers. Some of them, however, held on grimly and courageously. When their shields were not strong enough to block the arrows, they used the bodies of their dead comrades. But they held the line. "Do we stop now and charge, my lord?" asked Parvateshwar. "No, I want the third legion devastated as well. Let it go on for a few more minutes." "Yes, my lord. We should get half the archers to raise their range farther, so that we can target the Fomvar sections of the 4th Legion as well. Confusion would reign right into the heart of their troops if their lines are also broken." "You are right, Parvateshwar. Please do that." Meanwhile, the Chandravanshi cavalry on the western flank, sensing the hopelessness of their charge, began to retreat. Some Arishtainimi riders moved to give chase, but Vidyanmeli stopped them. As the Chandravanshis retreated, Vidyanmeli ordered his troops to hold their positions, lest the Chandravanshis launch a counter-attack. Seeing their enemy ride rapidly back to their lines, Vidyanmali ordered a withdrawal to their initial position on the flank of the bow formation. The Chandravanshis facing Myashrenik, however, were made of sterner stuff. Despite suffering severe casualties, they fought grimly, to retreat. Locked in battle, Myashrenik and his men fiercely held their ground. Suddenly, the hail of arrows stopped. The archers had been ordered to stand down. Now that their mission was accomplished without their intervention, the Chandravanshi brigadier ordered a retreat of his cavalry. Myashrenik, in turn, withdrew his troops quickly to his earlier position in preparation for the Mamsihaj, which he knew was just a few moments. "General, shall we?" asked Shiva, nodding towards the left flank. "Yes, my lord," replied Patviteshwar_ as Parvateshwar turned to mount his horse. Shiva called out, "Parvateshwar." "Yes, my lord." "Race you to the last line of the Chandravanshis." Parvateshwar raised his eyebrows in surprise, smiling broadly. "I will win, my lord." "We'll see," grinned Shiva, his eyes narrowed in a playful challenge. Parvateshwar rapidly mounted his horse and rode to his command on the left. Shiva, followed by Vraka, Nandi and Veerbhadra, rode to the right. Prasenjit geared his tortoise core in the center for the attack. "Meluhans," roared Shiva, dismounting SMCH3TH1Y_. "They lie in front of you, waiting to be slaughtered. It ends today. Evil ends today." "Ha ha Mahadev," bellowed the soldiers as the Meluhan conch shell, announcing the Surivanshi attack, was blown. With an ear-shattering yell, the infantry charged towards the Chandravanshis. The tortoise corps moved in their slow, inexorable pace towards the Chandravanshi center. The sides of the bow formation moved quicker than the center. The cavalry cantered along the flanks, protecting the infantry from an enemy charge. Courageous remnants of the 3rd and 4th legions of the Chandravanshis meanwhile were rapidly forming their lines once again to face the Surivanshi onslaught, but the mass of dead bodies of their fallen comrades did not allow them the space to form their traditional Chaturanga formation, which could have allowed some lateral movement. They were huddled together in a tight but thin line when the Surivanshis fell upon them. The Surivanshi battle plan was being executed immaculately. The tightly cut line of highly trained and vicious soldiers had the tortoise corps at the center with the flanking line of light infantry slightly behind. The unstoppable tortoise corps tore ruthlessly into the Chandravanshi center. The shields provided protection for the corps against the best Chandravanshi swordsmen, while their trishuls ripped through the sword weapons. The Chandravanshis had but evo choices. Either fall to the trishul, or be pushed towards the sides where the Surivanshis were now bearing down hard on them. Even as the center of the Chandravanshi army broke under the unrelenting assault, the Surivanshi flanks tore through their sides. Shiva was leading his flank ferociously into the Chandravanshis, decimating all in front of him. To his surprise, he found the enemy lines thinning. Letting his fellow soldiers charge ahead of him, he rose to his height to observe the movements. A part of the Chandravanshi line that had been opposing him had withdrawn only to regroup at the center of the battlefield. They were attacking the only exposed flank of the tortoise corps, their right side, which could not be protected by shields. Someone in the Chandravanshi army was using his brain. If any of the tortoises broke, the Chandravanshis would swarm through the center in a tight line, devastating the Surivanshis. Meluhans, roared Shiva. "Follow me." Shiva's flag bearer raised his pennant. The soldiers followed. The Nilkanth charged into the sides of the Chandravanshi lines that were bearing down on the tortoises. Caught in a pincer attack between the trishuls and the charge from Shiva's flank, the spirit of the Chandravanshis finally broke. What once a mighty Chandravanshi army was now reduced to independent stragglers fighting valiantly for a losing cause. Shiva and Parvateshwar steered their men into completing the job. Victory was absolute. The Chandravanshi army had been comprehensively routed. Chapter 24. A stunning revelation. Sati rushed out of her tent, followed by Kritika and Ayurvati. A little slowly, Sati cried, "Ayurvati, running to keep up. In your condition. Sati tummed and grinned at Ayurvedi, but did not reduce her pace. She hastened towards the royal tent where Shiva and Parvati would no doubt be after the declaration of victory. Nandi and Veerbhadra stood guard at the entrance. They moved aside to let Sati in, but Bardayakati and Kritika. I am sorry, Lady Ayurvedi, said Nandi apologetically, his head bowed. I have strict instructions to not let anybody in. Why? Asked a surprised Ayurvedi. I don't know, my lady. I am very sorry. That's alright, said Ayurvedi. You're only doing your job. Veerbhadra looked at Kritika. I'm sorry, darling. Please don't call me that in public, whispered Kritika, embarrassed. Sati pulled the curtain aside and entered the tent. I don't know, my lord, said Parvati. It doesn't make sense. Sati was surprised that Parvati had called Shiva my lord. But her joy at seeing Shiva safe brushed these thoughts aside. Shiva. Sati, mumbled Shiva, tumbling towards her. Sati froze. He didn't smile when he saw her. He didn't have the flush of victory on his face. He hadn't even got his wounds dressed. What's wrong? Asked Sati. Shiva stared at her. His expression worried her deeply. She tumbled towards Parvati. He looked at her for an instant with an obviously forced smile. One that was measured, obviously concealing bad tidings. What is it, Pitratulya? Parvati looked at Shiva, who spoke at last. Something about this troubles us. What could be troubling you? Asked a surprised Sati. You have delivered the greatest victory ever to the Suryavanshis. This defeat of the Chandravanshis is even more comprehensive than what my grandfather had achieved. You should be proud. I didn't see any Nagas with the Chandravanshis, said Shiva. The Nagas weren't there? Asked Sati. That doesn't make sense. Yes, said Shiva, his eyes carrying a hint of foreboding. If they were so thick with the Chandravanshis, then they would have been present on the battlefield. If they were being used by the Chandravanshis against us, then their skills would have been even more useful in the battle. But where were they? Maybe they've fallen out with each other, suggested Sati. I don't think so, said Parvati. This war was triggered by their joint attack on Mundal. Why would they not be here? Shiva, I am sure you'll figure it out, said Sati. Don't trouble yourself. Damn it, Sati, yelled Shiva. I can't figure it out. That's why I am worried. A startled Sati stepped back. His uncharacteristic vehemence stunned her. This was most unlike him. Shiva immediately realized what he had done and reached out his blooded hand. I'm sorry, Sati. It's just that The conversation was interrupted as Daksha, accompanied by an aide, raised the curtain and swaggered into the room. My lord, cried Daksha as he hugged Shiva tight. Shiva flinched. His wounds hurt. Daksha immediately stepped back. I'm so sorry, Mayan, said Daksha. Coming to his aid, he continued, why is Ayurvedi outside? Bring her in. Let her tend to the Lord's wounds. No, wait, said Shiva to the aide. I had said that I didn't want to be disturbed. There is always time to address the wounds later. Shiva turned towards Daksha. Your Highness, I need to speak about something. My lord, if you will allow me first, said Daksha, as enthusiastic as a little boy who had just been given a long-denied sweet. I wanted to thank you for what you have done for me. For Meluha we have done what even my father could not do. This is an absolute victory. Shiva and Parvati looked briefly at each other before Daksha garnered their attention again. Emperor Dilipar is being brought here even as we speak, said Daksha. What? Parat's surprise was evident. But we have just dispatched soldiers to their camp. They couldn't possibly have arrested him so soon. No, Parvati, said Daksha. I had sent my personal guards much earlier. We could see from the viewing platform that the Chandravanshals had already lost by the time the Lord and you had begun the third charge. That is the benefit of the perspective you get from a distance. I was worried that Dilipar might escape like the coward he is. So I sent off my personal guards to arrest him. But, Your Highness, said Parvateshwar, shouldn't we discuss the terms of surrender before we bring him in? I hat are we going to offer? Offer? Asked Daksha, his eyes twinkling with the euphoria of triumph. Frankly, we don't really need to offer anything considering that he was routed. He is being brought here as a common criminal. However, we will show him how kind Meluha can be. We will make him such an offer that his next 7 generations will be singing our praises. Before a surprised Shiva could ask what exactly Daksha had in mind, the crier of the royal guard announced the presence of Dilipar outside the tent. Accompanying him was his son, Crown Prince Bajirath. Just a minute, Kaustav, said Daksha, as he went into a tizzy, organizing the room exactly as he would have liked it to be. He sat down on a chair placed in the center of the RCH3M. Daksha requested Shiva to sit to his right. As Shiva sat, Sati turned to leave the tent. Shiva reached out to hold her hand. She turned, felt his silent plea and walked behind his seat to sit down on a chair. Parvateshwar sat to the emperor's left. Daksha then called out loudly, "Let him in." Shiva was anxious to see the face of evil. Despite his misgivings about the absence of the Nagas, he genuinely believed that he had fought a righteous war on the right side. Seeing the defeated face of the evil king of the Chandravanshis would complete the victory. Dilipar walked in. Shiva straightened up in surprise. Dilipar was nothing like what he had expected. He had the appearance of an old man, a sight that rare in Meluha due to the Samras. Despite his age, Dilipar had a rakishly handsome bearing. He was of medium height, had dark skin and a slightly muscular build. His clothes were radically different from the sober Meluhan fare. A bright pink dhoti, gleaming violet angvastram and a profusion of gold jewelry adorning most parts of his body, combined to give him the look of a dandy. The laughter lines around his lips spoke of his humorous disposition. A trimmed salt and pepper beard, accompanied by thick white hair under his extravagantly colored crown, completed the effete look while adding an intellectual air. "Where's the Crown Prince Bajirath?" asked Daksha. "I have asked him to wait outside since he can be a little hot-headed," said Dilipar. He looked only at Daksha, refusing to acknowledge the presence of the others in the room. "Don't you Meluhans have any custom of offering a seat to your guests?" "You are not a guest, Emperor Dilipar," said Daksha. "You are a prisoner." "Yes. Yes. I know." "Can't you get a joke?" asked Dilipar superciliously. "So what is it that you people want this time?" Daksha stared at Dilipar quizzically. "You have already stolen the Yamuna waters 100 years back," continued Dilipar. "What else do you want?" Shiva turned in surprise towards Daksha. "We did not steal the Yamuna waters," yelled Daksha angrily. "They were ours and we took them back." "Yes, whatever," dismissed Dilipar with a wave of his hand. "What are your demands?" This Shiva was astonished at how the conversation was progressing. They had just defeated this evil man. He should have been penitent. But here he was, being condescending and self-righteous. Daksha looked at Dilipar with wide eyes and a kindly smile. "I don't want to take anything. Instead, I want to give you something." Dilipar raised his eyebrows warily. "Gee, I asked something." "Yes, I intend to give you the benefit of our way of life." Dilipar continued to stare at Daksha with suspicion. "We are going to bring to you our superior way of life," continued Daksha, his eyes marveling at his own generosity. "We are going to reform you." Dilipar said with half a snigger, "Reform us?" "Yes. My general, Parvateshwar, will govern your empire as Viceroy of Swadweep. You will continue to be the titular head. Parvateshwar will ensure that your corrupt people are brought in line with the Meluhan way of life. We will live together as brothers now." Parvateshwar turned towards Daksha, stunned. He had not expected to be dispatched to Swadweep. Dilipar appeared to have difficulty in controlling his laughter. You actually think your straight-laced men can run Swadweep? My people are mercurial. They are not going to listen to your moralizing. Oh, they will, sneered Daksha. They will listen to everything we say because you don't know where the actual voice comes from. Really? Where does it come from? Do enlighten me. Daksha motioned towards Shiva and said, look who sits with us. Dilipar turned to Daksha's right and asked incredulously, who's he? What in Lord Indra's name is so special about him? Shiva squirmed, feeling increasingly uncomfortable. Daksha spoke a little louder. Look at his throat, O king of the Chandravanshis. Dilipar looked again with the same arrogance towards Shiva. Despite the dried smattering of and gore, the blue throat blazed suddenly. Dilipar's haughty smile disappeared. He looked shocked. He tried to say something, but he was at a loss for words. Yes, O corrupt Chandravanshi, scoffed Daksha, moving his hands for dramatic effect. We have the Neelkanth. Dilipar's eyes reflected the surprised agony of a child who'd just been stabbed from behind by his own father. An increasing dread gripped Shiva's heart. This was far from what he had expected. Daksha continued his hectoring. The Neelkanth has swum to destroy the evil Chandravanshi way of life. You have to listen. A bewildered Dilipar stared at Shiva for what seemed like an eternity. At long last, he recovered enough to softly whisper, you say. Before Daksha could bluster further, Dilipar turned and staggered towards the tent curtain. At the exit, he turned around to look at Shiva once again. Shiva swore that he could see a few tears in those proud, haughty eyes. As soon as Dilipar left the tent, Daksha got up and hugged Shiva, lightly, so as to not hurt the Neelkanth. My lord, did you see the look on his face? It was precious. Turning Parvateshwar, he continued, Parvateshwar, Dilipar is broken. You will have no trouble controlling the Swadweapons and bringing them around to our way of life. We will go down in history as the men who found a permanent solution to this problem. Shiva wasn't paying attention. His troubled heart desperately searched for answers. How could a struggle that appeared so righteous, just a few hours back, now suddenly appear so wrong? He turned towards Sati, forlorn. She gently touched his shoulder. What are you thinking, my lord? Asked Daksha, intruding into Shiva's troubled thoughts. Shiva Lust shook his head. I just asked if you would like to travel in Dilipar's carriage to Ayodhya, asked Daksha. You deserve the honor, my lord. You have led us to this glorious victory. This conversation did not appear important to Shiva at this point. He did not have the energy to think of an answer. He just nodded in an absent-minded manner. Wonderful. I'll make all the arrangements, said Daksha. Turning towards his aide, he continued, send Ayodhya in to immediately dress the Lord's wounds. We need to leave by tomorrow morning to make sure that we have control over Ayodhya, before chaos reigns. In the aftermath of Dilipar's defeat with an amassed towards Shiva, Daksha turned to leave. Parvateshwar, aren't you coming? Parvateshwar gazed at Shiva, his face creased with concern. Parvateshwar, repeated Daksha. Taking a quick look at Sati, Parvateshwar turned to leave. Sati moved forward, holding Shiva's face gently. Shiva's eyes seemed to droop with the heavy weight of tiredness. Ayodhya lifted the curtain carefully. How are you, my lord? Shiva looked up, his eyes half shut. He was descending into a strange sleep. He yelled suddenly, Nandi! Nandi came rushing in. Nandi, can you find me a cravat? Cravat, my lord, asked Nandi. Yes. TJMM_, but why, my lord? Because one need it, shouted Shiva. Shocked at the violence of his lord's reply, Nandi hurriedly left the chamber. Sati and Ayodhya looked at Shiva in surprise. Before they could say anything, however, he suddenly collapsed. unconscious. He was running hard, the menacing forest closing in on him. He was desperate to get beyond the reach of the trees before they laid their ravenous claws upon him. Suddenly, a loud insistent CD pierced through the silence. "Help! Please help!" He stopped. No. He wouldn't, or this time. He would fight that monster. He was the Mahadef. Was his duty. Shiva turned around slow, his sword drawn, his shield held high. "Jai Shri Ram," he yelled, as he raced back towards the clearing. The bushy thorns slashed his legs. Bleeding and terrified, he ran hard. "I will reach her in time. I will not fail her again, my blood will wash away my sin." He sprang through the thicket, discarding the thorns that cut deep into his flesh. Landing into the clearing. His shield was belt defensive, his sword chipped low to retaliate. But nobody attacked. A strange laughter finally hooked through his concentration. He lowered his shield slow. "Oh Lord," he shrieked, "be Aga." The woman 10 strick, 0 the ground, a short sword buried deep into her heart. The little boy moved on her side. Stunned. His hand was blooded with the STMGLE of Biz kill. The hairy monster sat on the VCO ledge, pointing at the little boy. Laughing. "No," screamed Shiva, as he awoke with a start. "What happened, Shiva?" asked a worried Sati, darting to hold his hand. Shiva looked around the room, startled. A worried Parvateshwar and Ayurvati got up too. "My lord." "Shiva, it's all right, RS all right," whispered Sati, gently running her hand along Shiva's face. "You were poisoned, my aunt," said Ayurvati. "We think that some of the Chandravanshi soldiers may have had poisoned weapons. It has affected many others as well." Shiva slowly regained his composure. He got off his bed. Sati tried to help him up, but he insisted on doing it himself. His throat felt excruciatingly parched. He stumbled over to the ewer, followed closely by Sati. He reached over and gulped down some water. "It seems like I have been asleep for many hours," said Shiva, finally noticing the lamps and the dark sky beyond. "Yes," said a worried Ayurvati, _close to 36 hours. 36 hours, cried a surprised Shiva, before collapsing onto a comfortable chair. He noticed a forbidding figure sitting at the back, his right eye covered in a bandage, his amputated left hand in a sling. "Drapaku." "Yes, my lord," said Drapaku, as he tried to get up and salute. "My God, Drapaku. It's so good to see you. Please sit down. It is heavenly to see you, my lord. How was your end of the battle?" "I lost too many men, my lord. Almost half of them. And this arm and I," whispered Drapaku _but by your grace, we held them till the main battle was won." "It wasn't my grace, my friend. It was your bravery," said Shiva. "I am proud of you, thank you, my lord." 3 Sati stood next to her husband, gently caressing his hair. "Are you sure you want to sit, Shiva? You can lie down for a while." "I have slouched around for long enough," Sati said. Shiva with a weak smile. Ayan, Kati smiled. "Well, the poison certainly didn't affect your sense of humor, my lord." "Really? Is it still that bad?" grinned Shiva. Parvateshwar, Drapaku and Ayurvati laughed weakly. Sati didn't. She was watching Shiva intently. He was trying too hard. He was trying to forget, trying to get others to focus on thing other than himself. Was this dream much worse than the others? "Somewhere is His Highness?" asked Shiva. "Father left for Aptoye this morning," said Sati. "My lord," said Parvateshwar, "His Highness felt that it would not be right to keep Swadweep without a sovereign for so long, under the circumstances. He felt it was important that the Surivanshi army marched across the empire immediately, with Emperor Dilipar as prisoner, so that the Swadweepans know and accept the new dispensation. So we're not going to Ayodhya. We will, my lord, said Ayurvati _ but in a few days when you are strong enough. Some 12,000 of our soldiers remain with us, said Parvateshwar _ we will march to Ayodhya when you are ready. His Highness insisted that Emperor Dilipar leave behind one of his family members with our unit as hostage to ensure that no Swadweepan attacks our much smaller force. So we have one of Emperor Dilipar's family members in our camp. Yes, my lord, said Parvateshwar _ his daughter, Princess Anandmayi _ Kati smiled, shaking her head slightly. What? Asked Shiva. Ayan. Kati looked sheepishly at Parvateshwar and then grinned at Sati. Parvateshwar glared back at Ayurvati _ what happened, asked Shiva again. Nothing important, my lord, clarified Parvateshwar, looking strangely embarrassed. It's just that she is quite well, I'll ensure that I remain out of her evari then, said Shiva, smiling. So this route seems to be the best, said Parvateshwar, pointing at the map. Shiva, along with the other poisoned soldiers, had recovered completely over the last 5 days. The march to Ayodhya was scheduled for the next day. I think you are right, said Shiva, his mind going back to the meeting with the Emperor of Swadweep. It's pointless feeling sorrowful for Dilipar. I'm quite sure he was posturing our meeting. The Chandravahis are evil. They are capable of deception. Our war was itious. We plan to leave in the morning, my lord, said Parvateshwar _ tumming towards Sati. He continued, you can finally see the birthplace of Lord Ram, my child. Yes, Pitratulya smiled Sati. But I don't know if these people would have kept his temple unharmed. They may have destroyed it in their hatred. Their conversation was interrupted by a loud commotion. Parvateshwar tummed around with a frown. What is gone out there, Nandi? Mayan, said Nandi from the other side of the curtain. The Princess Anandmayi is here. She has some demands. But we can't fulfill them. She insists on meeting you. Please tell Her Highness to wait in her tent, growled Parvateshwar _ I will be over in a few minutes _ I cannot wait, General, screamed a strong feminine voice from across the curtain. Shiva signaled to Parvateshwar to let her in. Parvateshwar tummed towards the curtain. Nandi, Veerbhadra, bring her in. But check her person for any weapons. In a few moments, Anandmayi, flanked by Nandi and Veerbhadra, entered Shiva's tent. Shiva raised his eyebrow at her appearance. She was taller than her father. And distractingly beautiful. A deep walnut-colored complexion complemented a body that was voluptuous, yet muscular. Her doe eyes cast a seductive look while her lips were in a perpetual pout, sensual yet intimidating. She was provocatively clothed, with a dhoti that had been tied dangerously low at the waist and ended many inches above her knees, while being agonizingly tight at her curvaceous hips. It was just a little longer than the loincloth that the Meluhan men wore during their ceremonial baths. Her blouse was similar to the cloth piece that Meluhan women tied, except that it had been cut raunchily at the top to the shape of her ample breasts, affording a view of her generous cleavage. She stood with her hips tilted to the side, exuding raw passion. You really think I can hide some weapons in this? Charged Anandmayi, pointing at her clothes. A startled Nandi and Sati glared at her, while Shiva and Veerbhadra sported a surprised smile. Parvateshwar shook his head slightly. How are you doing? Asked Anandmayi, flashing a smile while scanning him from top to bottom, her eyebrows raised lasciviously. Shiva couldn't help smiling as he saw Parvateshwar blush slightly. What is it you desire, princess? Barked Parvateshwar _ we are in the middle of an important meeting. Will you really give me what I desire, General? Sighed Anandmayi. Parvateshwar blushed even deeper. Princess, we have no time for nonsensical talk. Yes, groaned Anandmayi _ most unfortunate. Then perhaps you can help me get some milk and rose petals in this sorry little camp you are running _ Parvateshwar tummed towards Nandi in surprise. Nandi blabbered, my lord, she doesn't want just a glass, but 50 liters of milk. We can't allow that with our rations. You are going to drink 50 liters of milk, cried Parvati, his eyes wide in astonishment. I need it for my beauty bath, General, glowered Anand. May I you are going to take us on a long march from tomorrow. I cannot go unprepared. I will try and see what I can do, said Parvati. Don't hash 3, General. Do it, admonished Anand. May I Shiva couldn't control himself any longer. He burst out laughing. What the hell do you think you are laughing at? Glared Anand. May I, tumming towards Shiva. You will speak to the Lord with respect, Princess, yelled Parvati. The Laura. Grinned Anand. May I so he is the one in charge. The one Daksha was allegedly showing off. She tummed back towards Shiva. What did you say to trouble my father so much that he isn't even talking anymore? You don't look all that threatening to me. Be careful about what you say, Princess advised Parvati fiercely. You don't know whom you are speaking with. Shiva raised his hand at Parvati, signaling him to calm down. But Anand May I was the one who required soothing. Whoever you are, you will all be finished when our Lord comes. When he descends to Swadweep and destroys the evil of your kind. What? Take her out of here, Nandi yelled. Parvati. No wait, said Shiva. Tumming towards Anand. May I, he asked, what did you mean by saying Warni our Lord will descend to Swadweep and destroy the evil of our kind? Why should I answer you, Parvati's Lord? Parvati moved rapidly, drawing his sword and pointing it towards Anand May I's neck. When the Lord asks something, you will answer. Do you always move that fast? Asked Anand May I, her eyebrows raised saucily. Or can you take it slow sometimes? Bringing his sword menacingly close, Parvati repeated, answer the Lord, Princess shaking her head. Anand May I tummed Shiva. We wait for our Lord who will come to Swadweep and destroy the evil Surivanshis. Strong lines of worry began creasing Shiva's handsome face. Who is your Lord? I don't know. He hasn't shown himself as yet. An unfathomable foreboding sunk deep into Shiva's heart. He was profoundly afraid of his next question. But he knew that he had to ask it. How will you know that he is your Lord? Why are you so interested in this? I need to know, snarled Shiva. Anand May I frowned at Shiva as if he was mad. He will not be from the sacked signed you neither a Surivanshi nor a Chandravanshi but when he comes, he will come on our side. Shiva's inner voice whispered miserably that there was more. Clutching the armrest of his chair, he asked, and continued Anand May I, his throat will tumble when he drinks the Samras an audible gasp escaped Shiva as his Indi stiffened. The world seemed to spin. Anand May I frowned, even more confused about the strange conversation. Parvati glowered fiercely at Anand May I you are lying, woman. Admit it. You are lying. Why would I Anand May I stopped in mid-sentence as she noticed Shilpa's cravat-covered throat. The arrogance suddenly vanished from her face. She found her knees buckling under her. Pointing weakly with her hands, she asked, why is your throat covered? Take her out, Nandi, ordered Parvati. Who are you? Shouted Anand May I Nandi, and Veerbhadra tried to pull Anand May I out with surprising strength. She struggled against them. Show me your throat. They held on to her arms and dragged her backwards. She kicked Veerbhadra in the groin, causing him to double up in pain as she tumbled towards Shiva once again. Who the hell are? Shiva stared down at the table, unable to find the strength to even glance at Anand May I he held his armrest tightly. It seemed to be the only stable thing in a world spinning desperately out of control. Tottering towards her, Veerbhadra pinned Anand May I's hands from behind as Nandi threw an arm around her neck. Anand May I bit Nandi's arm brutally. As a howling Nandi pulled his arm back, she screamed again, answer me, damn it. Who are you? Shiva looked up for one brief instant into Anand May I's tormented eyes. The pain they conveyed lashed his soul. The flames of agony burned his conscience. A shocked Anand Mai suddenly became immobile. The misery in her eyes would have stunned the bravest of Meluhan soldiers. In a broken voice, she whispered, "You are supposed to be on our side." She allowed herself to be hauled out by Nandi, and Veerbhadra_Patviteshwar kept his eyes down. He dared not look at Shiva. He a good Surivanshi. He would not humiliate his lord by looking at him when he was at his weakest. Sati, on the other hand, would not leave her husband to suffer alone. She came to his side and touched his face. Shiva looked up, his eyes devastated and filled with the tears of sorrow. What have I done? Sati held Shiva tightly, holding his throbbing head against her bosom. There was no she could say that would alleviate his pain. All she could do was hold him. An agonized whisper suffused the tent with its resonant grief. What have I done? Chapter 25 Island of the Individual. It was another 3 weeks before Shiva's entourage reached Ayodhya, the capital of the Swadweepans. They had travelled along a decrepit, long winding road to the Ganga, and then sailed eastward to the point where the mighty river welcomed the waters of the Sarayu. Then they had cruised north, up the Sarayu, to the city of Lord Ram's birth. It was a long and circuitous route, but the quickest possible, keeping in mind the terrible road conditions in Swadweep, the island of Individual. The excitement in the hearts of the Meluhan soldiers was beyond belief. They had heard legends about Lord Ram's city, but not one had ever seen it. Zeobia, literally the impregnable city, was the land first blessed by Lord Ram's sacred feet. They expected a gleaming city beyond compare, even if it had been defiled by Chandravanshi presence. They expected the city to be an oasis of order and harmony, even if all the surrounding land had been rendered chaotic by the Chandravanshis. They were disappointed. Ayodhya was nothing like Devagiri. At first glance, it promised much. The outer walls were thick and astonishingly powerful. Unlike the sober grey Meluhan walls, the exterior of Ayodhya had been extravagantly painted with every possible colour in God's universe. Each alternate brick, however, was painted in pristine white. The royal colour of the pink and blue banners festooned the city towers. These banners, Chandravanshis numerous, had not been put up for any special occasion, but were permanent fixtures adorning the city. The road curved suddenly along the fort wall to the main entrance, so as to prevent elephants and battering rams from getting a straight run to the mighty doors. At the top of the main gates, a wonderfully ornate, horizontal crescent moon had been sculpted into the walls below. It was the Chandravanshi motto. Shrb Ga. Saundriya. Swatantrata. Passion. Beauty. Freedom. It only when they entered the city that a blow was delivered to the precision and order-loving Meluhans. Kritika described it as a functioning pandemonium. Unlike all Meluhan cities, Ayodhya was not built on a platform, so it was obvious that if the Sarayu River ever flooded in the manner that the temperamental Indus did, the city would be inundated. The numerous city walls, built in 7 concentric circles, were surprisingly thick and strong. However, it didn't need a general's strategic eye to notice that the concentric walls had not been planned by a military mastermind. They were in fact added in a haphazard manner, one after the other, when the city had extended beyond the previous perimeter. This explained why there were many weak points along each wall, which an enemy laying siege could easily exploit. Perhaps that was why the Chandravanshis preferred to battle outside in a faraway battleground rather than defend their city. The infrastructure was a sorry indictment of the Chandravanshi penchant for debate as an excuse for inaction. The roads were nothing better than dirt tracks. There was, however, one notable exception: the neatly paved and strikingly smooth Rafiath, the mule road, which led straight from the outer walls through to the opulent royal palace. The Swadweepans joked that instead of finding potholes on their road, they actually had to search for some stretch of road amongst the potholes. This was a far cry from the exceptionally well-planned, signposted, paved and tediously standard roads of Meluhan cities. There were, what can only be called encroachments, all over the city. Some open grounds had been converted into giant slums as illegal immigrants simply pitched their tents on public areas. The already narrow roads had been made even narrower by the intrusion of the cloth tents of the homeless. There was constant tension between the rich home-owning class and the poor landless who lived in slums. The emperor had legalized all encroachments established before 1910 BC, which meant that slum dwellers could not be removed unless the government created alternative accommodation for them. The minor problem was that the Chandravanshi government was so hideously inefficient that they hadn't managed to build even one new house for slum dwellers in the last 12 years. Now there was talk of extending the deadline further. The encroachments, the bad roads, the poor construction combined to give an impression of a city in a state of terminal decline. The Meluhans were outraged. I had these people done to Lord Ram's great city? Or was it always like this? Is that why Lord Ram had crossed the Sarayu River to establish his capital at faraway Devagiri on the Sarasvati? And yet, as the initial shock at the ugliness and frenzied disorder wore away, the Meluhans began to find strange and unexpected charm in this city of constant chaos. None of the Ayodhya houses were similar, unlike the Meluhan cities where even the royal palace was built to a standard design. Here each house had its own individual allure. The Swadweepans, unencumbered by strict rules and building codes, created houses that were expressions of passion and elegance. Some structures were so grand that the Meluhans were amazed with the divine engineering talent that must have created it. The Swadweepans had none of the restraint of the Meluhans. Everything painted bright, from orange buildings to parrot green ceilings to shocking pink windows. Civic-minded rich had created grand public gardens, temples, theaters and libraries, naming them after their family members, since they had received no help from the government. The Meluhans, despite finding it strange that a public building should be named after a private family, were impressed with the grandeur of these structures. It was a vibrant city that had exquisite beauty existing alongside hideous ugliness. Ayodhya both disgusted as well as fascinated the Meluhans. The people were living embodiments of the Chandravanshi way of life. The women wore skimpy clothes, brazen and confident about their sexuality. The men were equally fashion, what Meluhans would call dandies. The relationship between the and beauty-conscious men and women could only be characterized as one teetering on extremes. Extreme love coexisting with extreme hate, expressed with extreme loudness, all built on the foundations of extreme passion. Nothing was done in small measure in Ayodhya. Moderation was a word that did not exist in their dictionary. Therefore, it was no surprise that the mercurial people of Ayodhya scoffed at Daksha's proclaimed intention to reform them. Daksha entered a sullen city, whose populace lined silently along the sides of the Ray path, refusing to welcome the conquering force. Daksha, who had expected the Ayodhya residents to welcome him with showers of petals since they had finally been freed from their evil rulers, was surprised with the cold reception he got. His mind attributed it to a diktat by the Chandravanshi royalty. Shiva, who arrived a week later, was under no such illusions. He had expected far worse than just a quiet greeting. He had expected to be attacked. He had expected to be vilified for not standing up for the Swadweepans, who also believed in the legend of the Neelkanth. He had expected to be hated for choosing the so-called wrong side. But while he had begun to suspect that the Chandravanshis were not quite evil, he was not prepared to classify the Surivanshis as the wrong side either. He still felt that the Meluhans were almost without exception honest, decent, law-abiding people who could be unhesitatingly trusted. Shiva was deeply confused about his karma and his future course of action. He missed Brahaspati's keen wit and advice. His thoughts weighing heavily upon him, Shiva quickly disembarked from the curtained cart and tumbled towards the Chandravanshi palace. For a moment, he was startled by the grandeur of Dilapar's abode. But he quickly pulled himself together, reached out for Sati's hand, and began climbing the 100 steps towards the main palace platform. Parvati trudged slowly behind. Shiva glanced briefly beyond Sati, to find Anandmayi ascending the steps quietly. She had not spoken to Shiva since that terrible encounter when she had realized who he was. She climbed with an impassive face, her eyes set on her father. "Who the hell is that man?" asked an incredulous Swadweepan carpenter, held back at the edge of the palace courtyard by Chandravanshi soldiers. Why are our emperor and the sincere madman waiting for him on the royal platform, and that too in full imperial regalia? "Sincere madman?" asked his friend. "Oh, haven't you heard? That is the new nickname for that fool Daksha." The friends burst out laughing. "Shush," hissed an old man, standing next to them. "Don't you young people have any shame? Ayodhya is being humiliated and you think WSA joke." Meanwhile, Shiva had reached the royal platform. Daksha bent low with a namaste as Shiva smiled weakly and returned the greeting. Dilipar, with moist eyes, bent low towards Shiva. He cried in a soft whisper, "I am not evil, we are not evil." "What was that?" asked Daksha, his ears straining to hear Dilipar's whispered words. Shiva's choked throat refused to utter a sound. Not hearing anything from Dilipar either, Daksha shook his head and whispered, "My lord, perhaps this is an opportune moment to introduce you to the people of Ayodhya. I am sure it will galvanize them into action once they know that the Nilkanth has come to their rescue." Before an anguished Shiva could answer, his caring wife spoke, "Father, Shiva is very tired. It has been a long May he rest for some time." "Yes, of course," mumbled Daksha apologetically. Coming towards Shiva, he said, "I am sorry, sometimes my enthusiasm gets the better of me. Why don't you rest today? We can always introduce you at the court tomorrow." Shiva looked up at Dilipar's angst-ridden eyes. Unable to bear the tormented gaze any longer, Shiva looked beyond the Chandravanshi emperor, towards his courtiers standing at the back. Only one pair of eyes did not have a look of incomprehension. It was at that moment that Shiva realized that except for Anandmayi, nobody else in Dilipar's court knew of his identity. Not even Dilipar's son, Bajirath. Dilipar had not spoken to a soul. Clearly, neither had Daksha. Possibly in the overground unveiling of the secret, in the presence of Shiva himself. "My lord." Shiva tummed towards Parvati. "Yes," he said in a barely audible whisper. "I will lead the army out since the ceremonial march is over," said Parvati. "They will be stationed outside the city in the camp set up for the earlier contingent. I will be back at your service within 2 hours." Shiva nodded faintly. It had been a few hours since their in Ayodhya. Shiva had not spoken a word. He stood quietly at the window of his chamber, staring out as the afternoon sun washed the city in its dazzling glory. Sati sat silently by his side, holding his hand, drawing on all the energy that she possessed and then passing it on to him. He continued to stare out, towards a grand structure right in the heart of the city. It appeared to be built of white marble from this distance. For an unfathomable reason, looking at it seemed to soothe Shiva's soul. It was built upon the highest point in the city, on a gently sloping hill, clearly visible from every part of Ayodhya. Shiva mused as to why that building was so important that it occupied the highest point in the city, instead of the royal palace. A loud insistent knocking intruded upon his thoughts. "Who is it?" growled Parvati, rising from his chair at the back of the chamber. "My lord," answered Nandi. "It is the Princess Anandmayi." Parvati groaned softly before coming towards Shiva. The Nilkanth nodded. "Let her in," Nandi ordered. Parvati Anandmayi entered, her smiling demeanor startling Patviteshwar, who frowned in surprise. "How may I help you, your highness?" "I have told you so many times how you can help me," Parvati teased Anandmayi. "Perhaps if you listened to the answer rather than repeating the question again and again, we may actually get somewhere." Parvati's reaction was a combination of embarrassment and anger. Shiva smiled weakly, for the first time in 3 weeks. Somehow the fact that Anandmayi seemed to have returned to her usual self made Shiva happy. Anand Mai turned towards Shiva with a low bow. The truth has just come to me, my lord. I am sorry about my sullenness earlier. But I was deeply troubled at the time. Your being on the side of the Suryavanshis can have only one of evil explanations. Either we are evil, or you are not who we think you are and the legend is false. Accepting either of these explanations would destroy my soul. Shiva looked at Anand Mai attentively. But I have finally realized, continued Anand Mai _ the legend is not false. And we are obviously not evil, it is just that you are too naive. You have been misled by the evil. Suryavanshis _ I will set it right. I will show you the goodness of our path. We are not evil, glowered Patviteshwar _ Parvateshwar sighed Anand Mai _ I have told you earlier. That lovely mouth of yours can be put to much better uses than mere talking. You shouldn't waste your breath unnecessarily. Stop your impudence, Emdman, cried Parvateshwar _ You think we are evil? Have you seen the way you treat your own people? Hungry eyes have stared at me all through our journey. Children lie abandoned on the side of potholed highways. Old desperate women beg for alms throughout per impregnable city *, while the Swadweepan rich lead lives better than a Meluhan emperor. We have a perfect society in Meluha _ I may agree with the Lord and accept that maybe you are not evil. But you certainly don't know how to take care of your people. Come to Meluha to see how citizens should be treated. Your lives will improve with our method of governance. Improve, argued an agitated Anand Mai _ we are not. I agree. There are many things that our empire could do better, I agree. But at least we give our people freedom. They are not forced to follow some stupid laws mandated by an out-of-touch elite. Give them freedom. Freedom to do what? Isolate, steal, beg, kill. I don't need to argue with you about our culture. Your puny mind will not be able to understand the advantages of our ways. I don't want to. It disgusts me to see the way this empire has been managed. You have no norms, no control, no laws. It is no wonder that despite not being evil, you have contaminated yourselves by allying with the Nagas. By fighting like cowardly terrorists and not brave Kshatriyas. You may not be evil, but your deeds certainly are. Nagas. What the bloody hell are you talking about? Do you think we are mad that we will ally with the Nagas? You think we don't know how that will pollute our souls for the next 7 lives? And terrorism. We have never resorted to terrorism. We have strained against our natural instincts to avoid a war with your cursed people for the last 100 years. Hence we have retreated from the border provinces. We have cut all ties with you. We have even leaned to live with the reduced flow of the Ganga ever since Pu stole the Yamuna from us. My father told you that we had nothing to do with the attack on Mount Manda. But you did not believe us. And why should you? You needed an excuse to attack us again. Don't lie to me. At least not in front of the Mahadev. Chandravanshi terrorists have been found with the Nagas _ my father told you that nobody under our control had anything to do with the attack on Mandan. We have nothing to do with the Nagas _ it's possible that some Chandravanshis, just ilk some Suryavanshis, could have helped the terrorists. Had you cooperated with us, we may have even found the criminals. What rubbish. No Suryavanshi would ally with those monsters. As for some Chandravanshis assisting the terrorists, you'll have to answer for that. Swadweep is under your control. Had you not snapped diplomatic ties with Swadweep, it would not be lost on you that we are a confederacy far removed from your authoritarian structure. Eodhaya is only the overlord. Other kings within Swadweep pay us tribute for protection during Ivar, otherwise, they have the freedom to administer their kingdoms any which way they choose. How is that possible? Are you saying that the Emperor of Swadweep doesn't administer his own empire? Please, begged Shiva, stopping the argument which reflected the debate raging in his mind. He did not want to be troubled by questions for which he had no answers. At least not just as yet. Parvati and Anandmayi immediately fell silent. Coming slowly towards the window again, he asked, "What is that building, Anandmayi?" "That, my lord," said Anandmayi, smiling happily at being spoken to first, "is the Ramjanmabhoomi temple, built at the site of Lord Ram's birthplace." 3. You have built a temple to Lord Ram, asked a startled Parvati but he was a Surivanshi your swim enemy. "We did not build the temple," said Anandmayi, raising her eyes in exasperation. "But we have refurbished and maintained it lovingly. And furthermore, what makes you think Lord Ram was our sworn enemy? He may have been misled into following a different path, but he did a lot of good for the Chandravanshis as well. He is revered as a god in Aptoye Parvati's eyes widened in shock. But he had square 7 to destroy the Chandravanshis if he had vowed to destroy us, we wouldn't exist today, would we? He left us unharmed because he believed that we were good. That our way of life deserved to survive." Parvati's mind searched for answers, disturbed by the strength of her arguments. "You know what Lord Ram's full ceremonial name is?" asked Anandmayi, pressing home her advantage. "Of course I do," scoffed Patviteshwar Lord Ram, Surivanshi Kshatriya of the Ikshvaku clan. Son of Dasrath and Kaushalya husband of Sita honored and respected with the title of the 7th Vishnu. Perfect, beamed Anandmayi except for one minor mistake. "You have missed one small word, General. You have missed the word Chandra. His full name was Lord Ram Chandra." Parvati frowned. "Yes, General," continued Anandmayi his name meant the face of the moon. "He was more Chandravanshi than you seem to imagine." "This is typical Chandravanshi double talk," argued Parvati, gathering his wits. "You are lost in words rather than focusing on deeds. Lord Ram had said that only a person's karma determines his identity. The fact that his name had the word MCH3NM, it means nothing. His deeds were worthy of the sun. He was a Surivanshi to the core. Why couldn't he have been both Surivanshi and Chandravanshi? What nonsense is that? Is not possible. Is contradictory. It appears impossible to you only because your puny mind cannot understand it. Contradictions are a part of nature. No, they aren't. It is impossible that one thing be true and the opposite not be false. The universe cannot accept that. One scabbard can house just one sword. That is so only if the scabbard is small. Is it your case that Indram is not so sublime as to have no identities? You are just playing with words, glared Parvati Shiva had stopped listening. He turned towards the window and faced the temple. He could feel it in every pore of his body. He could feel it in his soul. He could hear the soft whisper of his inner 173 Ice Lord Ram will you. He'll guide you. He will soothe you. Go to him. It was the 3rd hour of the 3rd prahar when Shiva stole into the chaotic Ayodhya streets all by himself. He was on his way to meet Lord Ram. Sati had not offered to come along. She understood that he needed to be alone. Wearing a cravat and a loose shawl for protection, with a sword and shield as a measure of abundant precaution, Shiva ambled along, taking in the strange sights and smells of the Chandravanshi capital. Nobody recognized him. He liked it that way. The Ayodhyan seemed to live their life without even the slightest hint of self-control. Loud emotional voices assaulted Shiva's ears as if a hideous orchestra trying to overpower the senses. The common people either laughed like they had just gulped an entire bottle of wine or fought as if their lives depended on it. Shiva was pushed and shoved on several occasions by people rushing around, hurling obscenities and calling him blind. There were manic shoppers bargaining with agitated shopkeepers at the bazaar, and it almost seemed like they would come to blows over ridiculously small amounts of money. For both the shoppers as well as the shopkeepers, The harried negotiation wasn't about the cash involved. It was about Thiel's pride in having struck a good bargain in itself. Shiva noticed that a large number of couples had crowded into a small garden on the side of the road doing unspeakable things to each other. They seemed to brazenly disregard the presence of voyeuristic eyes on the street or in the park itself. He noticed with surprise that the PRYMG eyes were not judgmental, but excited. Shiva noted the glaring contrast with the Meluhans who would not even embrace each other in public. Shiva suddenly started in surprise as he felt a feminine hand brush lightly against his backside. He turned sharply to find a young woman grin back at him and wink. Before Shiva could react, he spotted a much older woman walking right behind. Thinking that she was the younger woman's mother, Shiva decided to let the indiscretion pass for fear of causing any embarrassment. As he turned, he felt a hand on his backside. "Oh me again," this time more insistent and aggressive. He turned around and was shocked to find the mother sensuously at him. A flabbergasted Shiva hurried down the road, escaping the bazaar before any more passes could disturb his composure. He continued walking in the direction of the towering Rami Anmabhumi temple. As he approached it, the unassailable jangle of Ayodhya dimmed significantly. This was a quiet residential area of the city. Probably for the rich, judging by the exquisite mansions that lined the avenues. Turning to the right, he came upon the road which led to his destination. It curved gently up the hill, caressing its sides in a smooth arc. This was probably the only road in Ayodhya, besides the Raj path, which was not pitted with potholes. Magnificent gulmohar trees rose brilliantly along the flanks of the road, their dazzling orange leaves lighting the path for the weary and the lost. The path that led to Lord Ram. Shiva closed his eyes and took a deep breath as anxiety gnawed at his heart. What would he find? Would he find peace? Would he find answers? Would he, as he hoped, find that he had done some good? Good that wasn't visible to him right now. Or would he be told that he had made a terrible mistake and thousands had died a senseless death? Shiva opened his eyes slowly, steeled himself and began walking, softly repeating the name of the Lord Ram. 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 A little farther up, Shiva's chant was disturbed. At a bend in the road, he saw an old, shriveled man, who appeared like he hadn't eaten in weeks. He had a wound on his ankle which had festered because of the humidity and neglect. He was dressed in a torn jute sack, which was tied precariously at his waist and hung from his shoulders with a hemp rope. Sitting on the sidewalk, his thin right hand scratched his head vigorously, disturbing the lice going about their eye diligently. With his weak left hand, he precariously balanced a banana leaf which held a piece of bread and some gruel. It looked like the kind of food distributed at cheap restaurants on the donations of a few kindly or guilty souls. The kind of food that would not even be fed to animals in Meluha. Intense anger surged through Shiva. This old man was begging, nay suffering, at the doors of Lord Ram's abode, and nobody seemed to care. Kind of government would treat its people like this? In Meluha, the government assiduously nurtured all its citizens. There was enough food for everyone. Nobody was homeless. The government actually worked. The old man would not have had to endure this humiliation had he lived in Devagli. The anger in Shiva gave way to a flood of positive energy, as he realized that he had found his answer. He knew now that Parvats were right. Maybe the Chandravanshis were not evil, but they led a wretched existence. The Surivanshi system would improve their lives dramatically. There would be abundance and prosperity all around when Parvats took charge of the moribund Chandravanshi administration. There will be some good that will come out of this war. Maybe he had not made such a terrible mistake after all. He thanked Lord Ram. He thought that he had found his answer. Fate, however, conspired to deny Shiva this small consolate. The old beggar noticed Shiva's stare and met it equally. The warm empathy in Shiva's eyes and the compassion of his smile prompted the ancient man to smile in return. However, it wasn't the smile of a broken man begging for alms. It was the warm welcoming smile of a man at peace with himself. Shiva was taken aback. The old man smiled even more warmly while raising his weak hand with great effort. "Would you like some food, my son?" Shiva was stunned. He felt humbled by the selfless gesture of the man he had thought was deserving of only pity. Observing Shiva staring fixedly, the old man repeated, "Would you like to eat with me, son? There is enough for both of us." An overwhelmed Shiva could not find the strength to speak. There wasn't enough food for even one man. In fact, why was this man offering to share what little food he had? It didn't make sense. Thinking Shiva was hard of hearing, the old man spoke a little louder, "My son, sit with me. Eat." Shiva struggled to find the strength to shake his head slightly. "No thank you, sir." The old man's face fell immediately. "This is good food," he said, his eyes reflecting his hurt. "I would not have offered it to you otherwise." Shiva realized that he had insulted the old man's pride. He had just treated him like a beggar. "No, no, that's not what I meant. I know it's good food. It's just that The old man softly interrupted Shiva's words. "Then sit with me, my son." Shiva nodded quietly. He sat down on the pavement. The old man turned towards Shiva and placed the banana leaf on the ground, in between the two of them. Shiva looked at the bread and watery gruel, which until a few moments back had appeared unfit for humans. The old man looked up at Shiva, his half-blind eyes beaming. Shiva picked up a small morsel of the bread, dipped it in the gruel and swallowed. It slipped into his body easily, but weighed heavy upon his soul. He could feel his righteousness being squeezed out of him as the poor, old man beamed generously. "Come on, my son, if you are going to eat so little, how will you maintain your big muscular body?" A startled Shiva glanced up at the old man. The circumference of those shrunken arms would have been smaller than Shiva's wrist. The old man was taking ridiculously small bites, moving larger portions of the bread. Shiva could not find the courage to look up anymore. As his heart sank deeper and his tears rose, he continued to eat the portion the old man had given him. The food over in no time. Freedom. Freedom for the wretched to also have dignity. Something impossible. Meluha's governments. Are you full now, my son? Shiva nodded slowly, still not daring to look into the old man's eyes. "Good. Go. It's a long walk up to the temple." Shiva looked up, bewildered by the astounding generosity being shown to him. The old man's sunken cheeks were spread wide as he smiled affectionately. He was on the verge of starvation, and yet he had given practically all his food to a stranger. Shiva cursed his own heart for the blasphemy he had committed. The blasphemy of believing that he could actually save such a man. Shiva found himself bending forward, as if in the volition of a greater power. He extended his arms and touched the feet of the old man. The old man raised his hand and touched Shiva's head tenderly, blessing him. "May you find what you are looking for, my son." Leaden with guilt and remorse, Shiva rose heavily, his self-righteousness crushed by the old man's munificence. He had his answer. What he had done was wrong. He had made a terrible mistake. These people were not evil. Chapter 26. The question of questions. The road to the Ramjanmabhoomi temple clung to the sides of a gently sloping hill and ended its journey at Lord Ram's abode. It afforded a breathtaking view of the city below. But Shiva did not see it. Neither did he see the magnificent opulence of the gigantic temple nor the gorgeously landscaped gardens around it. The temple was sheer poetry, written in white marble, composed by the architect of the gods. The architect had designed a grand staircase leading up to the main temple platform, which was awe-inspiring and yet inviting. Colossal ornate marble statues in sober blue and grey had been engraved on the platform. Elaborately carved pillars supported an ostentatious yet tasteful ceiling of blue marble. The architect obviously knew that Lord Ram's favorite time of the day was the morning. On the ceiling the morning sky, as it would have been seen in the absence of the temple roof, had been lovingly painted. On top of the ceiling, the temple spire shot upwards to a height of almost 100 meters, like a giant namaste to the gods. The Swadweapons, to their credit, had not imposed their Gansh sensibilities on the temple. Its restrained beauty was in keeping with the way the sober Lord Ram would have liked it. Shiva did not notice any of this. Nor did he look at the intricately carved statues in the inner sanctum. Lord Ram's idol at the center was surrounded by his beloveds. To the right was his loving wife, Sita, and to the left was his devoted brother, Lakshman. At their feet, on his knees, was Lord Ram's most fervent and favorite disciple, Hanuman, of the Vijayaputra tribe. The sons of the wind god Shiva could not find the strength to Lord Ram in the eyes. He feared the verdict he would receive. He crouched behind a pillar, resting against it, grieving. When he couldn't control his intense feelings of guilt anymore, his eyes released the tears they had been holding back. Shiva made desperate attempts to control his tears, but they kept flowing as though a dam had burst. He bit into his balled fist, overcome by remorse. He curled his legs up against his chest and rested his head on his knees. Drowning in his sorrow, Shiva did not feel the compassionate hand on his shoulder. On getting no reaction, the hand squeezed his shoulder lightly. Shiva recognized the touch but kept his head bowed. He did not want to appear weak, be seen with tears in his eyes. The gentle hand, old and worn with age, withdrew quietly, while its owner waited patiently until Shiva had composed himself. When the time was right, he came and sat down in front of him. A somber Shiva did a formal namaste to the Pandit, who looked almost exactly like the Pandits that Shiva had met at the Brahma temple at Meru and the Mohan temple at Mohenjo-Daro. He sported the same flowing white beard and a white mane. He wore a saffron dhoti and angvastram, just like the other Pandits did. The wizened face had the same calm, welcoming smile. Shiva couldn't help noticing though that this once was far more generous. "Is it really so bad?" asked the Pandit, his eyes narrowed and head tilted slightly, in the typically Indian empathetic manner. Shiva shut his eyes and lowered his head again. The Pandit waited patiently for Shiva's reply. "You don't know what I have done." "I do know." Shiva looked up at the Pandit, his eyes full of surprise and shame. "I know what you have done, O Neelkanth," said the Pandit, "and I ask again, is it really so bad?" "Don't call me the Neelkanth," glared Shiva. "I don't deserve the title. I have the blood of thousands of innocents on my hands." "Many more than thousands have died," said the Pandit, "probably hundreds of thousands. But do you really think they wouldn't have died had you not been around? Is their blood really on your hands?" "Of course it is. It was my stupidity that led to this war. I had no idea what I was doing. A responsibility was thrust upon me and I wasn't worthy of it. Hundreds of thousands have perished as a result." Shiva curled up his fist and pounded his forehead, desperately trying to soothe the throbbing heat on his brow. The Pandit stared in mild surprise at the deep red blotch on Shiva's forehead, right between his eyes. It was not the color of a blood clot, it was a much deeper hue, almost black. The Pandit chose silence, though his surprise was barely controlled. The time was not yet ripe. The moment of revelation had not yet come. "And it's all because of me," moaned Shiva, his eyes moistening again. "It's all my fault." "Soldiers are Kshatriyas, my friend," said the Pandit, a picture of calm. "Nobody forces them to die. They choose their path, knowing full well the risk it entails. And also the possible glory that comes with it. The Neelkanth is not the kind of person on whom responsibility can be thrust against his will. You chose this. You were born for it." Shiva looked at the Pandit, startled. His eyes seemed to ask, "Born for it?" The Pandit ignored the question posed by Shiva's eyes. "Everything happens for a reason. If you are going through this turmoil, There is a divine plan in it. What bloody divine reason can there be for so many deaths? The destruction of evil. Wouldn't you consider that a very important reason? But I did not destroy evil, yelled Shiva. These people aren't evil. They are just different. Being different isn't evil. The panda's face broke into his typically enigmatic smile. Exactly. They are not evil. They are just different. You have realized it very quickly, my friend, a lot earlier than the previous Mahadev. Shiva was perplexed by the pandit's words. Lord Rudra. Yes. Lord Rudra. But he did destroy evil. He destroyed the Asuras. And who said the Asuras were evil? I read it. Shiva stopped mid-sentence. He finally understood. Yes, smiled the pandit, you have guessed correctly. Just like the Surivanshis and the Chandravanshis see each other as evil, so did the Devas and the Asuras. So if you are going to read a book written by the Devas, what do you think the Asuras are going to be portrayed as? You mean they were just like today's Surivanshis and Chandravanshis? More so than you can imagine. The Devas and the Asuras, just like the Chandravanshis and the Surivanshis, represent two balancing life forces, a duality. Duality. Yes, a duality that is one of the many perspectives of the universe, the masculine and the feminine. The Asuras and the Surivanshis represent the masculine, the Devas and the Chandravanshis speak for the feminine. The names change, but the life forces they embody remain the same. They will always exist. Neither can ever be destroyed. Otherwise the universe will implode, and they see their fight with the other as the eternal struggle between good and evil. Exactly, beamed the pandit, marveling at Shiva's keen mind even in his time of distress. But they haven't been fighting all the time. Sometimes, there have been long periods of preparation as well. In times of strife, which usually happens when there is evil, it is easy to blame each other. The difference between two dissimilar ways of life gets portrayed as a fight between good and evil. Just because the Chandravanshis are different from the Surivanshis doesn't mean that they are evil. Why do you think the Nilkanth had to be an outsider? So that he would not be biased towards any one way of life, said Shiva, as a veil lifted before his eyes. Exactly. The Nilkanth has to be above all this. He has to be devoid of any bias. But I was not free of biases. I was convinced that the Chandravanshis are evil. Maybe what Anand May says is right. Maybe I am naive, easily misled. Don't be so hard on yourself, my friend. You cannot drop from the sky knowing everything, can you? You would have to enter the equation from one side or the other, and whichever side you entered from, you would obviously be colored by their ways, while viewing the other side as evil. You have realized your error early. Lord Rudra did not recognize it till it was almost too late. He had nearly destroyed the Asuras before he grasped the simple fact that they were not evil, just different. Near destroyed them. You mean some Asuras still exist? The pandit smiled mysteriously. That conversation is for another time, my friend. What you need to understand is that you are not the first Mahadev who was misled. And you will not be the last. Imagine, if you will, what Lord Rudra's feelings of guilt must have been. Shiva kept quiet, his eyes downcast. The knowledge of Lord Rudra's guilt did not reduce the shame that racked his soul. Reading his thoughts, the pandit continued. You made the best decision you could under the circumstances. I know that this will be cold comfort, but being the Nilkanth isn't easy. You will have to bear the burden of this guilt. I know the kind of person you are. It will be a heavy burden. Your challenge is not to suppress the guilt or the pain. You have too good a heart to be able to do that. Your challenge is to stay true to your karma, to your duty, spite of the pain. That is the fate and the duty of a Mahadev. But what kind of a Mahadev am I? Why am I required? How am I to destroy evil if I don't know what evil is? Who has said that your job is to destroy evil? A startled Shiva stared hard at the pandit. He disliked the irritating word games that these pandits seemed to love to indulge in. Glimpsing the anger in Shilpa's eyes, the pandit clarified immediately. The strength that evil has is overestimated, my friend. It is not so difficult to annihilate. All it takes is for a few good men to decide that they will fight it. At practically all the times that evil has raised its head, it has met the same fate. It has been destroyed. Then why am I required? You are required for the most crucial task, to answer that most important question. What? What is evil? What is yes? Many wars have been fought amongst men, said the pandit and many more will be fought in the future. That is the Evari of the world. But it is only a Mahadev who can convert one of these wars into a battle between good and evil. It is only the Mahadev who can recognize evil and then lead men against it before evil raises its ugly head and extinguishes all life. But how do I recognize evil? I can't help you there, my friend. I am not the Mahadev. This is a question you must find the answer to. But you have the heart, you have the mind. Keep them open and evil will appear before you appear. Yes, explained the pandit, evil has a relationship with you, it will come to you. All you have to do is recognize it when it appears. I have only one suggestion. Don't be hasty in trying to recognize evil, wait for it. It will come to you. Shiva frowned. He down, trying to absorb the strange conversation. He turned towards Lord Ram's idol, seeking some direction. He did not find the judgment-filled eyes he had expected to see. Instead, he saw a warm, encouraging smile. Your journey is not over, my friend. Not by a long shot, it has just begun. You have to go on. Otherwise evil will triumph. Shiva's eyes cleared up a bit. His burden didn't feel any lighter, but he felt strong enough to carry it. He had to keep walking to the very end. Shiva looked up at the pandit and smiled weakly. Who are you? The pandit smiled. I know the answer had been promised to you. And a promise made by any of us is binding on all of us. I will not break it. Shiva gazed at the pandit, waiting for the answer. We are the Vasudevs. The Vasudevs. Yes. Each Vishnu leaves behind a tribe which is entrusted with two missions. Shiva continued to watch the pandit intently. The first mission is to help the next Mahadev, if and when he appears. And the second? The second is that one of us will become the next Vishnu, whenever we are required to do so. The seventh Vishnu, Lord Ram, entrusted this task to his trusted lieutenant, Lord Vasudev. We are his followers. We are the tribe of Vasudev. Shiva stared at the pandit, absorbing the implications of this information. He frowned as one inference suddenly occurred to him. Did the Mahadevs also leave some tribes behind? Did Lord Rudra? The pandit smiled, deeply impressed by Shiva's intellect. The Mohenjo-daro secretary was correct. This man is capable of a Mahadev. Yes. Lord Rudra did leave behind a tribe. The tribe of Vayaputra. Vayaputra, asked Shiva. The name sounded oddly familiar. The pandit placed his hand on Shiva's shoulder. Leave this for another time, my friend. I think we have spoken enough for today. Go home. You need Purgud's comforting embrace. Tomorrow is another day. And your mission can wait till then. For now, go home. Shiva smiled. An enigmatic smile. Out of character with his simple Tibetan ways. But he had become an Indian now. He leaned forward to touch the pandit's feet. The pandit placed his hand on Shiva's head to bless him, speaking gently. Vijay Bhav_J Guru Vishwamitra J Guru Vashishva Shiva nodded, accepting the blessings with grace. He got up, turned and walked towards the temple steps. At the edge of the platform, he turned around to look at the pandit Ome again. The pandit was sitting on his haunches, touching his head reverentially to the ground that Shiva had lust vacated. Shiva smiled and shook his head slightly. Looking beyond the pandit, he gazed intently at the idol of Indram. He put his hands together in a namaste and paid his respects to the Lord. His burden didn't feel lighter, but he felt strong enough to carry it. He tummed and began descending the steps. To his surprise, Sati was right in the middle of the compound, leaning against a statuesque apsara cast in stone. He smiled. There was nobody in the world whom he would much rather see at this time. Walking towards her, he teased, "Are you always going to follow me around? I know when you need to be alone," smiled Sati. "And when you need me?" Shiva froze suddenly. He could see a robe flapping behind the trees, a short distance from Sati. The light evening breeze gave away the position of the skulking man. Sati followed Shiva's gaze and tummed around. A robed figure, wearing a holy mask, emerged from behind the trees. "It is him." Shiva's heart started beating faster. He was still a considerable distance away from Sati. The Naga was too close for comfort. The three stood rooted to feel spots, assessing the situation, evaluating the other's next move. It was Sati who moved first. Shifting quickly, she pulled a knife from her side hold and flung it at the Naga. The Naga barely stirred. The knife missed him narrowly, slamming hard into the tree behind him, burying deep into the wood. Shiva moved his hand slowly towards his sword. The Naga reached behind, pulled the knife out of the tree and, in a strange act, tied it tightly to his right wrist with a cloth band. Then he moved, quickly. "Sati!" screamed Shiva, as he drew his sword and started sprinting towards his wife, pulling his shield forward as he ran. To be continued.